Chapter 1846. Facing off against 8 Tao masters with his own strength. Even if he had already ignited the great Tao of incense flame, he would still die without a doubt. Qin Yu was well aware of his own limitations, so he chose this different world as the battlefield. Because in this world, he had another identity, the ancient race's king. Kill Luo Guan. The 8 Tao masters were enraged, and their hearts seethed with killing intent. As soon as they arrived, they attacked without hesitation. It was also because they could not afford to delay any longer. The backlash from the origin energy of heaven and earth on the 9 white jade capitals was becoming more and more terrifying. Bang! In the next moment, a terrifying strength submerged Qin Yu's figure. It came from the hateful attacks of the 8 Tao masters, enough to instantly turn a true sovereign into powder. Even if it was an existence that had already ignited a Joss flame great Tao, there was no way for them to resist. Once one was unable to endure it, then the only outcome would be death. However, at this moment, there was not the slightest bit of relief or happiness on the faces of the 8 Tao masters. Instead, there was a serious look on their faces. Roar! A roar suddenly resounded in the heavens and the earth, while terrifying energy raged through the surroundings. It formed an expanse of distortion, and then a figure that was lofty like a mountain and capable of supporting the heavens and the earth appeared. His hands tore forward as he brazenly charged into the fields of vision of the 8 Tao lords. Luo Guan, the 9th Tao master's pupil shrank. This is the presence of a berserker. No, it's not a berserker. This presence is even older and stronger than a berserker's. The 2nd Tao master's expression was solemn. It is indeed not a berserker, but the origin of its bloodline, the ancient race that has gone extinct in the world. The expressions of the other Tao masters changed drastically. Ancient race. The Tao lords were no strangers to this name. After all, they were once one of the strongest races in the universe. Even though they had been extinct for a very, very long time, there were still some rumors circulating about the ancient race. Furthermore, the pillars of that temple in the depths of the Sea of Stars were none other than the corpses of powerful ancient race beings. As long as that shrine existed, it was impossible for the ancient race to disappear from the world. Luo Guan's true identity was that of an ancient race. He's not Luo Guan, the 7th Tao master said through gritted teeth. He had been deceived by Qin Yu from the very beginning. That's no longer important, the 2nd Tao master said, taking a deep breath. So what if it's the ancients? Let's join forces and kill him here. All right, kill him. Don't delay any further. Bang! The 8 Tao lords attacked at the same time. When Qin Yu transformed into an ancient, he used the Joss Flame Great Tao to borrow the strength of the ancient race within the body of this world's great beast. As mentioned before, the behemoths in this world obtained the power of the ancient race. As the behemoths grew stronger, so did the power of the ancient race. This was the first time that Qin Yu had truly become the incarnation of an ancient who was born to support the heavens and earth, and whose backbone would not fall even after death. He could clearly feel the terrifying strength roaring through his body. With just a punch or a kick, he could cause the world to tremble and the sun and moon to lose their light. Perhaps the current Qin Yu was the most powerful ancient that had ever existed in the endless years of time. Facing the combined attacks of 8 Tao masters, Qin Yu took a deep breath. His heart fiercely beat in his chest, causing the blood in his body to circulate at high speeds. It was like crimson magma, releasing a scorching heat and ruthlessness. At this moment, he did not feel the slightest bit of fear in his heart. It was as if he could even fight against the heavens and earth. Ancient! He let out a roar. Bang! The space shook violently, and a huge armor flew out from the shaking space and covered his body. Then, Qin Yu lifted his hand. His fingers clenched and a spear fell into his palm. When Qin Yu transformed into the heaven-supporting ancient race, he was already incomparably powerful, like a giant that could destroy the world. Now, his aura rose once more. Ancient divine armor. Ancient Divine Spear. During the peak of the ancient race, these were the divine tools that they possessed. Now that Qin Yu had transformed into an ancient race, it was only then that he could truly release the full might of these two divine tools. The spear thrust out. Wherever the spear point went, space collapsed, forming a straight line that shot towards the 8 Tao Lords. In the next moment, there was a heaven-shaking explosion. The shock waves of the collision instantly wiped out the surrounding tens of thousands of miles, leaving behind nothing but emptiness. The heaven-supporting ancient race's body was sent flying away. His flesh and blood ruptured, revealing horrifying wounds. His flesh and blood rained down like rain. Even though Qin Yu had transformed into an ancient race and summoned the ancient divine armor and ancient divine spear, he was still at an absolute disadvantage against the 8 Tao Lords. No, it was more accurate to say that he was being completely crushed. If it weren't for the fact that the ancient race's body was incomparably tough to begin with, and if it weren't for the fact that he had a supreme defensive treasure like the ancient divine armor that helped him resist a great majority of the impact, then Qin Yu would have already been torn to pieces and killed on the spot. Even though he had suffered heavy wounds, when Qin Yu transformed into an ancient, his aura didn't weaken at all. Instead, it became even stronger, wild and wild, as if it would tear apart the world. At the same time, within Qin Yu's soul space, the cosmic sea-cross bell shook and a ringing sound spread out. In the next moment, all the giant beasts that lived in this different world began to roar out in submission. The giant beasts submitted to Qin Yu, but they also submitted to the cosmic sea-cross bell. Strictly speaking, the cosmic sea-cross bell was the true ruler of this ancient race ranch. It controlled the life and death of all the giant beasts here. With deep roars, the blood energy within the giant beasts began to boil. Endless blood energy shot into the skies, gathering in the skies, and weaving together into an incomparably thick blood-red cloud that blocked out the skies. Qin Yu transformed into an ancient. At this time, he opened his mouth and swallowed. The thick blood-red cloud condensed into a column that entered his body through his nose and mouth. On the surface of the ancient's wounded body, his flesh and blood began to wildly regenerate at a speed visible to the naked eye. Stepping down, the ancient divine spear drew an arc in the air without hesitation. That's right, even though he knew he wasn't a match, he still had to take the initiative to attack. Facing a powerful enemy, he didn't feel any fear or retreat. This was the ancient race. Powerful, ruthless, unafraid of death. The 8 Tao Masters paled, their eyes filled with anger. We cannot delay any longer. We must end this battle as soon as possible. The second Tao Master took a deep breath. First Tao, he roared out loud. There were 9 white jade capitals. There were 9 Tao Masters. When 9 white jade capitals gathered together, they could instantly form an impenetrable iron wall. And when the 9 Tao Masters joined forces, the strength they could erupt with would increase to an astonishing degree. In the distance, within the 9 white jade capitals, the first Tao Master who had suppressed the outside world, the Forsaken Clan, Emperor Chai, and the other rebels, had a change in expression. He never thought that even with 8 Tao Masters chasing after him, they still wouldn't be able to kill Qin Yu. At this moment, an extremely foreboding premonition rose in the first Tao Master's heart. It was like the skies above his head had darkened and endless shadows fell down, covering the 9 white jade capitals. And at this time, the shadows rapidly thickened, turning into darkness. It was like a great mouth had opened up and swallowed them all. The first Tao Master took a deep breath and suppressed his tumbling thoughts. He glanced at the 9 heaven and earth source beads above his head and stepped forwards. Kill Luo Guan. Once he died, today's dangerous situation would naturally come to an end. And as the first Tao Master left, the speed at which the 9 heaven and earth source beads swallowed the white jade capitals rose once more. A phantom appeared in the sealed-off safe zone of the 9 white jade capitals. Qin Yu, hold on for a bit longer. It will be over soon. He muttered to himself, finding it hard to conceal the worry in his voice. The 9 Tao Masters joined forces to hunt down the 8 Tao Masters. It seemed as if they were only missing one. But comparing 9 to 8, it wasn't just a single digit. Rather, it was a massive disparity in strength. This was the difference between the heavens and the earth. Even the little blue lamp would find it difficult to face the combined might of 9 Tao Masters. And with Qin Yu's current strength, no matter how strong he was, facing 9 Tao Masters, he simply couldn't resist. With a deep breath, the phantom vanished from sight. In the next moment, space shook and the phantom of a great sun appeared. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The 9 heaven and earth source beads swallowed the white jade capitals at a crazy speed. This was because at this time, they obtained the support of the blazing sun fragment. But doing this didn't come without a price. For instance, between the heavens and earth, the other rulers of the blazing suns could easily lock onto the little blue lamp's current position. This was a variable. Because its body wasn't complete and a great deal of its memories were missing, the little blue lamp couldn't determine just what sort of attitude the other rulers of the blazing suns had towards it. And even if it didn't provoke trouble from the other rulers of the blazing suns because of this, it couldn't be forgotten that there was still another ruler of the blazing sun fragment in the void realm. And that person was constantly trying to lock onto its position and kill Qin Yu to become the new ruler of the blazing suns. This was the power of the blazing suns that was released on its own initiative. If it was said that the other fragments couldn't sense it, the little blue lamp wouldn't believe it. But it had no other choice. If Qin Yu died now, everything would be meaningless. It could only fight. It could only hope that things were still within its control. The eternal sea, a hidden different world. Bang! Space shattered. In this world, all the powerful great beasts felt their hearts tremble. They subconsciously looked up and saw the first Tao Master who had broken through the highest heavens. Even though the first Tao Master was nothing more than an ant-like existence in their eyes. But now, these great beasts could feel the taste of destruction from the first Tao Master. It was like a boundless abyss. First Tao, Luo Guan's true identity is an ancient. Let's join forces to kill him. The second Tao Master roared. The first Tao Master had no expression. Okay, he arrived here, and the 9 white jade capitals had lost control. The heaven and earth source beads intensified their swallowing power. Attack! Bang! The 9 Tao Masters each erupted with a dreadful aura. At this time, the entire different world was thoroughly suppressed. Roar! Qin Yu had transformed into an ancient. As he felt danger approaching, he roared out loud. The ancient divine armor covering his body erupted with a brilliant divine light. At the same time, endless blood energy crazily fused into his body, causing the ancient's exposed skin to turn a deep red. The ancient divine spear thrust out. The first Tao Master lifted a hand and pointed a finger. There was no way to describe the strength of this finger. As it fell, it was like the world itself was nothing more than a chess piece that was grasped between the fingers. Qin Yu's heart violently shrank. He felt endless despair. The ancient's eyes turned red, and he roared out loud. Kill! Bang! There was a heaven-shaking explosion, as if the heavens and earth were being split apart. The entire different world trembled. In fact, even the hidden eternal sea began to stir up great waves. With loud rumbles, the waves swept out in all directions. The towering figure of the incomparably powerful ancient vanished beneath this strike. A terrifying pit appeared in the ground. It was so deep that it seemed as if it had pierced through the entire earth. Qin Yu lay at the bottom of the pit. Every inch of his flesh and blood was covered in cracks, and his blood dyed the ground red. He lay motionless. If it weren't for the slight rise and fall of his chest, one would think he had already died. This was Qin Yu's limit. The ancient's body had been shattered. If it weren't for the Joss Flame, Great Tao, being able to barely maintain it, he would have died by now. But the world source backlash against the 9 white jade capitals hadn't been completed, even if they were close to success. But failure was still failure. Qin Yu and the little blue lamp had devised a perfect plan. It had progressed smoothly, even better than they had expected. But the 9 Dao Masters were far too strong. They were so strong that they used every method they had. But the final result still couldn't be changed. As Qin Yu lay at the bottom of the pit, he felt as if his entire body had been crushed to pieces. The pain penetrated deep into his marrow and into his soul. It was impossible to resist. The first Dao Master appeared above. He looked down at Qin Yu. He didn't say anything. He only lifted a hand and pointed downwards. And this simple strike was enough to kill the current Qin Yu. In the skies above the 9 world sources, within the great sun phantom, the little blue lamp had no expression. He had already prepared himself for the worst-case scenario, that Qin Yu would be killed. This would undoubtedly ruin all of the little blue lamp's plans and even lead to a series of unpredictable consequences. But he had no other choice. Backlash against the white jade capitals was an incomparably crazy plan to begin with. The chances of success were slim, and it was already rare for it to reach this step. The little blue lamp didn't want to take this risk, but it had no other choice. This was Qin Yu's only chance to become the victor. Otherwise, even if he didn't die now, he would die in the future. Moreover, this future was already very close. Will you really watch helplessly on as Qin Yu is killed? If so, then I admit defeat. Otherwise, Qin Yu wouldn't have died today. The cards I left for him haven't been played yet. The little blue lamp thought out loud. His voice was low, but he clenched his teeth. He was nervous, because today's battle concerned the overall situation, life or death. In the pit, the first Dao Master's fingertip had already fallen between Qin Yu's eyebrows. He sighed, anger in his voice. You've gone too far. If you continue to scheme like this, it will be difficult for me. A pale and delicate hand appeared out of thin air. It didn't go to save Qin Yu, but pointed between the first Dao Master's eyebrows. It was a simple plan to attack the besieged, to rescue the besieged. But the first Dao Master didn't dare to gamble. This was because the moment this beautiful hand appeared, he could feel an extremely terrifying aura. It wasn't obvious, but it could directly freeze the soul. What a terrifying woman. In this world, besides the ruler of the blazing sun, there was actually such a powerful woman. It was unimaginable. He drew back and stepped back. The first Dao Master fell into the pit, his eyes dark. Shua, the other 8 Dao Masters appeared beside him, all of them locking onto the ruler. She still had the appearance of someone who couldn't wake up in 8 lifetimes. Her eyes were filled with exhaustion. Everyone, I am truly sorry, but this boy cannot die right now. I can only play the villain this time. Are you sure you can't take a step back? The first Dao Master slowly asked. He was anxious, but he didn't reveal any of this on the surface. The ruler shook his head. I'm sorry. Kill. The first Dao Master roared, his face fierce. The 8 Dao Masters behind him froze. Their eyes widened, revealing shock, anger, shock, and disbelief. This was because this shout of kill wasn't aimed at the ruler, but at them. The bodies of the 8 Dao Masters suddenly turned illusory. They were like frost that formed on the surface of a window in winter, rapidly vanishing beneath the illumination of the sun. And at the same time, the first Dao Master's aura began to wildly rise at an unbelievable speed. The ruler narrowed his eyes. This method is a bit interesting. You've hidden it quite well. I didn't even notice it before. The first Dao Master had a calm expression. Unless it was absolutely necessary, I wouldn't have dared to embarrass myself in front of you. He took a deep breath. The figures of the 8 Dao Masters burst like bubbles and vanished. He stepped forwards. Bang! With a single step, the heavens shook. I have no idea who you are, but if you can take a step back in today's matter, I will be endlessly grateful. Seeing the ruler remain silent, the first Dao Master said, I indeed do not wish to be enemies with you. Still silence. The first Dao Master's eyes shined with a cold light. The ruler suddenly lifted a hand. Across from him, the first Dao Master's aura froze. She blinked. I'm stalling for time. Don't you know? Chapter 1847. The First Tao Lord. No, to be more precise, he was the sole ruler of the White Jade capital. He was the only true Tao Lord. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, who would have believed that the 8 Tao Lords were like illusions, vanishing just like that? When the 9 White Jade capitals worked together, they could erupt with immense power. Previously, they had thought that it was because the 9 White Jade capitals were one. However, it was very obvious that the truth was revealed at this moment. Only when the 9 Tao Lords were gathered together would they truly be complete, because they were the same person. Now, the 9 Tao Lords had fused together and restored their true bodies. Naturally, they possessed the most powerful and terrifying strength. It was truly powerful to the point where even the Sovereign Lord found it a bit troublesome to deal with. He had no choice but to act shamelessly. Bang! The ruler of the White Jade Jing took a step forward. The air suddenly became heavy as if it had been frozen in an instant. Terrifying power surged forth from all directions, drowning out the Sovereign Lord. Earlier, he had said that he didn't want to be enemies with the Sovereign Lord, and that had come from the bottom of his heart. However, now that he was certain that there was no way for the two of them to reconcile, there was no need for the First Tao Master to make a move. He didn't hesitate at all. Kill! The roar was like an order, and thick layers of clouds suddenly surged out from the sky. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Thunder roared and exploded. Thunder surged, and dazzling lightning swept out in all directions. At the same time, the laws of the entire world were twisting and collapsing at this moment, before completely reforming in the next moment. This alternate world hidden deep within the eternal sea had become the home turf of the First Tao Lord. This was the true terror of world-level experts. With a single thought, the surroundings would become one's own domain. With supreme authority, everything could be determined by a single thought. Yes, the current First Tao Lord was a world-level expert, and one who stood at the very apex of power. In fact, the First Tao Master had reached this realm a very, very long time ago. However, he discovered that there was no path forward for him. It was impossible for him to continue breaking through. This was why the 9 White Jade capitals had appeared, giving birth to 9 Tao Lords. All of this was for the sake of waiting for an opportune moment that would allow him to take another step forward. In truth, the reasoning behind this was quite simple. By merging the power of 9 world-level cultivators into one's own body, one would be able to break through the limits of one's foundation, resulting in a qualitative transformation. Using brute force to break through the Tao, since there was no path ahead, he would open one. However, the arrival of the Sovereign Lord had ruined the First Tao Lord's plans, so he had no choice but to return to his true self ahead of time. He was still a supreme world-level expert, just like he had been in the past. However, the difference in strength between two people of the same cultivation realm was like the difference between the heavens and the earth. The First Tao Lord of today was even more powerful. He had yet to break through to the world level, but the power he possessed was more than enough to easily slay world-level experts of the same level. Now that the First Tao Lord attacked, he transformed the natural laws of heaven and earth, transforming the alternate world in the middle of the eternal sea into his domain. Terrifying power bore down on the Sovereign Lord. "You really have a bad temper," said the Sovereign Lord with a frown. A look of helplessness could be seen in his eyes as he pushed out with his hand. The moment his finger landed, the entire world seemed to have been paused. Be it the First Tao Lord or the surging destructive power, they both came to a standstill. His Excellency ruler flicked his sleeves and wrapped up Chinyu. The two of them vanished from sight. In the next moment, the stagnant world suddenly recovered. Rumble! A deafening explosion erupted. The entire world fell into a frenzy as an extremely terrifying power wreaked havoc in every corner of the world. The First Tao Master's pupils constricted, and he revealed a look of shock. Blazing sun grasp. With a single finger, the entire world had been sealed away. Even he himself had fallen into a temporary state of stillness. This was something that only the most exalted and exalted blazing suns, who represented the unparalleled power and status of the universe, could do. This was because long, long ago, when the first Tao Lord had decided to split himself apart, he had personally experienced something like this. However, the first Tao Lord was certain that the sovereign Lord who had acted was definitely not a blazing Sunday. This was because she didn't emanate the aura of a blazing Sunday. She wasn't a blazing sun, but she was a woman who was comparable to a blazing sun. A scorching heat instantly appeared in the depths of the first Dea Lord's eyes. One of the reasons he had split himself apart was because he wanted to break through to the world level, but there was a second reason. It was because of the ancients. He had personally witnessed the rise and fall of the ancients, and he had come to a single conclusion. Anyone who posed a threat to the blazing sun grasp would be mercilessly wiped out. Thus, the first Tao Lord had chosen to split himself apart and merge into the human race, establishing the human cultivation system of today. In truth, it was the first Tao Lord who had passed down his own cultivation methods to the human race. The so-called human cultivation system was something that came to be later on. But this wasn't important. What was important was that today, the first Tao Lord had discovered a turning point that he yearned for even in his dreams. Perhaps he would be able to break through to his current level in a more straightforward and direct manner. Kill this woman. Seize her realm. Boom. Space shattered. The first Tao Lord vanished without a trace. In the next moment, he appeared above the vast and endless eternal sea. The sovereign revealed a helpless look. He lifted Qin up with one hand and looked at the first Tao Lord. Are you sure you want to fight with me? The first Tao Lord stepped forwards. Please enlighten me. Oh, you've suddenly grown bolder. Have you taken a fancy to my realm? The sovereign lord's eyebrows arched up. Still, your concealment techniques aren't bad. Otherwise, given your realm, you would have been killed long ago. The first Tao Lord punched out. The method of stalling for time could work once, but it would only work once. The sovereign lord curled his lips, feeling quite bored. Even if one cultivated to the level of the first Tao Lord, an existence that was only a step away from wielding the power of a blazing sun, they still couldn't avoid this. They still didn't know just how far a step away was. After all, a true sovereign could descend with a single thought, much less the blazing sun. The reason she felt this was tricky was because in her current state, she couldn't use too much strength. Secondly, she didn't want others to discover that she had secretly cheated her way into this world. As for the last reason, the sovereign lord was worried that he wouldn't be able to hold back and would kill the first Tao Lord. The world source backlash against the white jade capital had yet to complete. If he killed the first Tao Lord and the 9 white jade capitals collapsed, then this matter would be ruined. Little Qin Yu was pitiful. He finally saw a glimmer of hope. The sovereign lord didn't want to personally act and ruin this hope. After all, there was one thing that the little blue lamp wasn't wrong. This matter involved life and death. Cheating could be done in secret, as long as no one discovered it. Even if someone guessed it and she refused to admit it no matter what, no one could force her to lower her head and admit her mistakes. But soon, the final examination would arrive. At that time, the eyes of all the heavens would converge and she wouldn't be able to interfere. So, this told them a truth. If it was a small matter, there might be some unorthodox methods that could be taken. But when it came to serious matters, one had to rely on themselves. Thinking about it, the sovereign lord decided that it was best not to attack. If the first Tao Lord wanted to fight, then he would let him. How could he injure her? She opened her mouth and spat out a bubble, covering Qin Yu and the sovereign lord within. Then, she tossed Qin Yu aside and sat down herself. This trip had cost her a great deal, and she felt tired. The sovereign lord dozed off a little. As for the terrifying strength contained in the first Dea Lord's fist, it had arrived. Bang! The bubble shook. It could barely be called shaking. It was like a gentle breeze blowing across a spring lake, causing ripples to spread out. This was a comfortable feeling. The sovereign lord sighed. She found a comfortable position and leaned against Qin Yu, closing her eyes. Her breathing became light and slow. The first Tao Lord was silent. He stubbornly stared at the sovereign lord within the bubble. His pupils shrank, and endless shock appeared in his eyes. After cultivating to this step, he had truly stepped onto the highest level. With a single thought, he could collapse and reshape the rules of the entire world. Just what sort of transcendent boundary was this? But even the all-out punch of the formidable first Tao Lord wasn't able to shatter a single bubble. In particular, this bubble was the first Tao Lord. He had personally seen the Sovereign Lord spit out from her mouth. It was extremely easy. He didn't feel any fluctuations of strength at all. This was heart-wrenching. And what was even more terrifying than this heart-wrenching pain was a deep sense of powerlessness and fear. Was she really controlled by a blazing sun? But this strength seemed to be far from what a blazing sun could possess. Just who was she? Who? Who? The sound of even breathing came from her nose and mouth. The Sovereign Lord seemed to have fallen asleep. She turned around and nuzzled her head against Qin Yu's body, changing into a more satisfied position. At the corners of her mouth, a faint crystalline light appeared. She was actually drooling in sleep. The first Daelord's eyes were cloudy and uncertain. Then, he took a deep breath and pointed out a finger. This was his last attempt. If he still couldn't shake the defense of this bubble, then he would immediately leave. Dong! With a light sound, the bubble began to surge. Countless tiny cracks appeared on its surface. More and more appeared, and as it looked as if it would break in the next moment, the first Daelord's eyes brightened. Indeed, this bubble wasn't ordinary at all. It seemed as if it had simply been spat out from her mouth. But the truth was that it was an incomparably formidable defensive treasure. I knew that it was impossible for such a formidable woman to exist in this world. 1 breath of time, 2 breaths of time, 3 breaths of time. More and more cracks appeared. The bubble that seemed on the verge of breaking actually stiffened up. It didn't break. The first Daelord's complexion darkened. He felt that there was something inexplicably familiar about this scene in front of him. At this time, a voice echoed in his mind. "I'm stalling for time, don't you know?" Bang! The surrounding space suddenly twisted and shattered, wildly collapsing inwards. The first Daelord's figure was about to vanish within. In the bubble, the seemingly asleep Sovereign Lord mumbled, "You aren't really that stupid. However, I've already made my move today. Since you've accepted your fate and have been schemed against, then don't leave. Otherwise, there's no meaning in me taking this loss." Bang! An invisible strength spread out, sweeping out in all directions. The entire world fell silent. Everything, including the first Tao Lord, was suppressed. In the distant void, a figure appeared out of thin air. As he arrived, the phantom of the sea of chaos automatically appeared. Whoosh! This was the sound of tumbling seawater. An invisible strength acted upon the phantom's body, wanting to drag him in and make him lose himself forever. "Be good, don't mess around." The phantom shook his head. He let out a breath. Then, the sea of chaos that appeared shattered like a shadow, vanishing without a trace. It was fine if you cheated before, because it wasn't too obvious. But today you've gone too far, the phantom said in a soft voice. He lifted a hand and pointed forward. "So I will also cheat. Only then can it be considered fair. What do you think?" The phantom turned around and faced the empty void. At this time, his aura was solemn and his entire body exuded a cautious air. It was as if there really was an existence in this void that required him to deal with it with all his strength. Humph! A cold snort sounded out, filled with annoyance. The phantom faintly smiled, his body relaxing a little. "It's good that you admit it. After all, if I caught you on the spot and shredded all pretense of cordiality, no one would feel good about it." He took a step back and said, "Of course, I will only make a move once, and it will be much quieter than yours then. I will leave first." Shwa! The phantom vanished. And as the phantom vanished, another figure appeared in the void. It was also blurry and indistinct, but it gave off an extremely familiar feeling. If Qin were here, he would immediately recognize that this was the mysterious Lord Ruler. She looked in the direction where the phantom's finger had pointed, and her eyes wavered. "Hey, you've gone too far. I only pointed him in a general direction, I didn't directly give him a position. If you attack, I won't be polite either. A helpless voice sounded out. It was calm, as if it were a conversation between two familiar friends. But the Lord Ruler was well aware of what sort of person he was. There were some things that he could constantly back down on and even pretend as if they had never happened. For instance, when she had cheated a little, but not too serious a matter. But there were some things that touched his bottom line, and he would never back down. He would only fiercely counterattack. The Lord Ruler was experienced in this. If it weren't for this, she wouldn't be in her current state. Of course, the other party wasn't any better off. All that was left was a phantom. Then let's each take a step back. Before the final result is revealed, neither of us will interfere. The Lord Ruler sneered. That's what I've always done. The helplessness in the voice became even heavier, giving one a headache. The Lord Ruler turned and left. She and the phantom hadn't truly met. One had appeared and the other had hidden. Only after the other had left would they reveal themselves. It was like they were in different dimensions, never having a point of intersection, or it could be said that this point of intersection had been deliberately avoided by the two of them. As for why, only they knew. Above the 9 white jade capitals, between the great suns, the little blue lamp's expression was solemn, or perhaps it could be said that it was unprecedentedly solemn. He looked up into the skies, his body tense, as if he were facing a great enemy. Suddenly, the little blue lamp let out a long breath. Luckily, the most terrifying situation hadn't occurred. Otherwise, things would have been troublesome. Indeed, it was best to scheme against others less. In particular, scheming against those existences that were beyond one's control. Humph! Now you know what fear is? Didn't you know how to use your brain before? An annoyed voice suddenly sounded out. The little blue lamp bowed. I'll have to trouble you, but there's nothing I can do. Enough nonsense. This is the last time. I really can't do anything after this. Also, boy, have you guessed something? The little blue lamp hesitated for a moment. I don't dare to hide it. I do have some speculations, but what is the truth? Don't ask. Even if you ask, I won't tell you. The Lord Ruler paused for a moment and then continued. In any case, the result will be revealed soon. Yes, the little blue lamp bowed. After several breaths of time, he straightened himself. The aura that descended just now had already vanished from sight. The 9 world sources were nearing the end of swallowing up the white jade capitals. Because of the Lord Ruler's help, this scheme had finally been smoothly completed. But this had also been the final card in Qin Yu's hand. The Lord Ruler had clearly informed him that she wouldn't do anything after this. Everything that followed could only depend on herself and Qin Yu. Luckily, after swallowing up the 9 white jade capitals, Qin Yu finally had the qualifications to truly go all out. Otherwise, even if he ignited the Joss flame, great Tao, all that awaited him was death. Chapter 1848. The first Tao Master had died. This great cultivator had lived for countless years and had personally witnessed the rise and fall of the ancient races. But in his final moments, his heart was filled with confusion, resentment, and a deep sense of powerlessness. This was because it was only at this moment that he discovered that he had never truly seen through the world in front of him. He had originally stepped into the peak of the world realm. He had split himself to fuse with humanity and built 9 white jade capitals, wanting to combine them into one and break through his own limits. He had used strength to prove the Tao, although he had no choice but to stop because of the ruler's arrival. The first Tao Master who had returned to his true self had become even more powerful. He even believed that he was just a single step away from becoming a true blazing sun. Between the two sides, there was only a single step, but the difference in this single step was so great that it left him in despair. In this suppressed state, he could clearly sense the strength of the white jade capital being wildly plundered until it was on the verge of drying up. As for the first Tao Master, he and the white jade capital had long since formed a common bond. They were in an inseparable state. The destruction of the 9 white jade capitals also meant that the first Tao Master had stepped into the gates of death. Of course, He had tried to destroy the world heart and drag Chinyu down with him. But in the end, the only result was that he felt even more aggrieved and indignant. In the bubble, the ruler was sleeping soundly. She snorted several times and opened her eyes, a look of dissatisfaction on her face. She turned and reached out a hand, pinching Chinyu's face. "You're still pretending. I already knew you were awake. You were just too childish." Chinyu opened his eyes, an awkward look on his face. He stood up, took 2 steps back, and cupped his hands together. "Greetings, Lord Ruler. Little Chinyu, we meet again. Don't you think you should say something to me?" The ruler had a dangerous look in her eyes. Chinyu coughed. "Lord Ruler is unfathomably deep. There is naturally nothing you don't know." He flattered as much as he could. In short, there was no way for him to explain himself, because there were far too many things that he didn't know how to say. Moreover, there were many things that he couldn't say. For instance, why did the ruler treat him so differently? Just who was she? What was the relationship between Misty and the ruler? All these things pressed down on Chinyu's heart, like claws scratching at his heart. He was worried that as soon as he opened his mouth, he wouldn't be able to stop himself from asking and angering the sovereign lord. The consequences would be hard to say. Therefore, silence is golden. "Umph." The Lord Ruler glanced at him. "Slippery fellow. Forget it. I can't be bothered to argue with you, but I have to remind you that you don't have much time left. So, before you get killed right in front of your eyes, there are some things that you need to deal with that need to be dealt with quickly. In any case, you have some strength now. How can you be a man when you are running around like a man? When it's time for a man to be hard, he must be hard." Chinyu's mouth twitched. His Excellency's sovereign's words were quite impressive. But soon, he was no longer in the mood to let his imagination run wild. That was because while his words didn't sound very appropriate, the hidden meaning behind them was extremely frightening. Chinyu glanced at the sovereign lord. She pouted. "Why are you looking at me? That's all I have to say. It's up to you whether you understand or not. Go, try not to die. If you live, you'll naturally know everything you want to know. Otherwise, prepare to become a muddled ghost." Swish, the Lord Ruler disappeared. Chinyu took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. He turned and stepped forwards, vanishing from sight. The next moment, he arrived at the ruins of the 7th White Jade capital. That's right, the ruins. This was because as the 9 origin sources of heaven and earth completed their final devouring, the 9 white jade capitals had all collapsed. Led by Emperor Chai, the people who had besieged the white jade capitals stared at the scene before them in shock. They had personally experienced the battle, so they naturally knew how powerful the white jade capital was. But the white jade capital, which was unbelievably powerful and almost undefeatable, had been destroyed just like that. The destruction of the 9 white jade capitals meant something that even a fool could understand. Up until this moment, the 9 Tao Lords had yet to appear, so it was undoubtedly a fact. Today, the battle to besiege the white jade capital had started without any warning, but it had also ended abruptly, giving everyone a dreamlike feeling. Whoosh! Chinyu's figure appeared in front of everyone. Emperor Chai's pupils shrank slightly, and he subconsciously took a step back. Great fear appeared in the depths of his eyes. Previously, when the 9 Tao Lords had fallen out with Chinyu and he had escaped, everyone had seen with their own eyes. Now, Chinyu had returned safely, but the 9 Tao Lords had disappeared, and the white jade capital had been reduced to ruins. No one would believe that this had nothing to do with Chinyu. So, it was he who had killed the 9 Tao Lords and destroyed the white jade capital. Roar! Roar! Roars suddenly rang out. It was the Forsaken clan. After losing their #1 target, the white jade capital, they fell into a state of rage after a brief moment of confusion. This was because the 9 origin sources of heaven and earth had disappeared along with the spatial tremors after they had completed the backlash. Now, Chinyu's arrival instantly attracted the attention of all the Forsaken clan members. This was because of the aura of the origin sources of heaven and earth. At this moment, in the eyes of the Forsaken clan, Chinyu was like an incomparably huge, sweet, and beautiful woman. One bite was enough to make one feel like they were walking on clouds. Accompanied by roars, countless members of the Forsaken clan swarmed over. A glimmer of light flashed in the eyes of Emperor Chai and the others. They were happy to see this happen. Firstly, they could take the opportunity to test Qin Yu's strength and determine whether their previous guesses were true. Secondly, if the Forsaken clan could directly kill Qin Yu, this was also a situation they wanted to see. After all, no matter what happened today, everyone had risked their lives to rebel against the White Jade capital. Seeing that the dust had settled, no one wanted to inexplicably have another father appear above their heads. Unfortunately, although Emperor Chai and the others had a good idea, the reality was different from what they had imagined. Qin Yu looked at the endless number of members of the Forsaken clan swarming over. He lifted a hand and pointed forward. It was true. It was just a point, and there were no energy fluctuations at all. However, the moment this point was pointed, it had already determined the fate of all the members of the Forsaken clan to be destroyed. Within sight, all the members of the Forsaken clan who looked like withered skeletons instantly froze on the spot. Then, in the next moment, their bodies began to shatter and disintegrate. Like illusions and phantoms, they quickly disappeared. They completely disappeared. There was no longer a single member of the Forsaken clan in front of him. The shattered space channel was still there. Just like when the 9 White Jade capitals had joined forces to descend a terrifying suppressive force to wipe out the Forsaken clan, there were enough of them. In just a few breaths of time, they would fill up the entire field of vision. However, this time it was not like this. A low roar of fear came from the shattered space. Then, a pair of incomparably huge bone claws drilled out and grabbed the edge of the shattered space, actively sealing the channel. Emperor Chai and the others were dumbfounded. Their bodies stiffened, and their eyes were filled with horror. They looked at Qin Yu, who had pointed out and then retracted his finger. His expression was extremely calm, and he did not seem to be affected by the scene before him. At this moment, a single thought was running through their minds. Who was he? How strong was he? Unfortunately, they did not know the answer to these two questions. To be more precise, no one in this world knew the answer. Even Qin Yu himself did not know how strong he was right now. Regardless of the reason, he had won today's battle. The 9 realms had rebelled against the White Jade capital and used this opportunity to completely recover. As for him, he was the master of the 9 realms, similar to how the first Dao master was to the White Jade capital. However, Qin Yu's strength did not stop there. He had also ignited the incense flame Great Dao and was an absolute powerhouse who had taken a crucial step. As for the 9 realms, they were 9 true and complete worlds. Compared to the White Jade capital, they were on a higher level. The reason was simple. The first Dao master, who controlled the 9 White Jade capitals, was still trapped in his original spot, hoping to devour the 9 realms and use it to break through his bottleneck. Just this point alone was enough to determine who was stronger. Qin Yu's gaze swept over Emperor Chai and the others. Not long ago, they had been restless and harboring some thoughts. Now, their expressions changed drastically. They felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over their heads, drenching them to the core. In the future, I will be the ruler of the human race. If anyone is dissatisfied, feel free to make a move. Today, I will give all of you a chance to challenge me. Today, I will give all of you a chance to challenge me. No one dare to act rashly. Nonsense. This was such a simple logic. The 9 Dao masters had all fallen at Qin Yu's hands. The fact that he had killed countless members of the Forsaken clan with a single finger was the best proof. Challenge him? This was no different from courting death. Qin Yu's expression was calm. Since you have all tacitly agreed, then remember that I have already given you a chance to object. In the future, if anyone dares to make the slightest move, I will not let them off lightly. Shua. He turned around and vanished from sight. Emperor Chai and the others were still in a daze. He had eliminated the White Jade capital, declared his sovereignty, and then left? What was going on? They couldn't understand it at all. Shouldn't the most important thing to do now be to control these people and then establish complete rule over the world in the shortest time possible? In reality, that wasn't the case for Chinyu. Right now, his fist was the biggest. In the human cultivation system, no one was his match. In other words, if Chinyu wanted to establish his own position, it would be a simple matter. Under his watchful eyes, Chinyu's thoughts weren't here at all. This was because the shattered Nine Realms had regained the source of the world and was rapidly being reconstructed. As the ruler of the Nine Realms, Chinyu needed to personally participate in this process, and this would also further increase his control over the Nine Realms. According to the little blue lamp, after being reconstructed, the Nine Realms would be Chinyu's own children. He would be able to control them completely and reach a realm where he could do as he pleased. This was the same as being able to achieve everything in one go and completely control his own body and the sudden increase in strength. To the anxious Chinyu who had received the Lord Ruler's reminder, this was the best result. He naturally couldn't miss it. Nine Realms. The altar where the Heavenly Spirit clan was located. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The area around them was like a boundless sea of chaos, filled with a destructive aura. Everything had been torn apart, leaving behind only endless chaos. In the entire world, only the altar was still intact. It was barely able to protect the people of the Heavenly Spirit clan, allowing them to survive this terrifying apocalyptic scene. But as time passed, the altar began to break apart bit by bit. Countless tiny cracks appeared on its surface. From the looks of it, the altar wouldn't be able to last much longer. Once it broke, the only thing that awaited the Heavenly Spirit clan was death. Mother, I'm afraid. A young child tightly hugged his mother, his eyes wide with fear. Don't be afraid. The Lord Ruler has already arrived. He will protect us. Nothing will happen. Nothing will happen. The mother squeezed out a smile and comforted her child. But her hands were shaking and her face was pale. And at the same time, in the forest world, the magma world, the sea world, all the other worlds were experiencing similar scenes. The world had already been destroyed. Only the altar was the last line of defense. They were all waiting for the final conclusion and judgment. Suddenly, a speck of light appeared in the skies above the chaotic and tyrannical broken world. Then, it rapidly brightened, as if a sun had descended above their heads. The aura of destruction that filled the world and caused one to feel despair and dread suddenly slowed down and then began to vanish. The Lord Ruler. It's the Lord Ruler. He has obtained the final victory. A patriarch shouted out loud. He looked at the sun above his head, his face filled with joy. Their world had been reborn. As the source of the world returned, it constantly fused into the world itself. With the altar as the center, the broken world began to rapidly reform and reform. The earth appeared beneath their feet, rapidly extending outwards. At the same time, a blue sky appeared above their heads once more. After destruction, what followed was a vibrant life force. Because of this, the entire world had truly obtained a new life. Countless heavenly spirits knelt on the ground. As they looked at the creation of the world in front of them, their bodies trembled with excitement. They knew that from this day forth, the fate of their people had been completely rewritten. Great and supreme Lord Ruler, please accept the most sincere worship and faith of my heavenly spirit race. You are our only light, and you will guide our entire heavenly spirit race into a truly bright future. Sea world, magma world, forest world. The native life forms of the Nine Realms were celebrating at this time. Tears of joy and excitement fell down their cheeks. At the same time, they offered Chinyu an endless amount of pure and pious faith power, causing the surface of the Joss Flame Great Tao to burn even more fiercely. However, Chinyu didn't care about any of this for the time being. He grasped the Nine Realms token and stood in the skies. He closed his eyes and carefully felt the joy from the Nine Worlds. A smile lifted the corners of his lips. So this was the Nine Realms. Chinyu opened his eyes. At this time, there was no light surging within them. Instead, there was only endless tranquility and calmness, like a deep lake that hid the countless secrets of the world. Unfathomably deep. Even now, Qin Yu didn't know just how strong he was. But he was certain that he had the qualifications to fight Emperor Qin. The Lord Ruler's reminder had already exposed him to the point where he couldn't be any more exposed. He wasn't an idiot, so he was well aware of this. Thus, the human cultivator system had come to an end. He would return to the desolate domain world and fight Emperor Qin. He would end the entanglement of fate between the two of them. When he ignited the Joss flame Great Tao, Qin Yu had faintly sensed something. After the 9 realms completed their backlash against White Jade Capital and were reborn, this feeling became clear. He and Emperor Qin were fated to fight. It was like this battle had been decided a long, long time ago when Qin Yu was born. Qin Yu didn't know why he would have this thought, but he didn't doubt it at all. Rather, he was incomparably sure of it. Is this fate? Qin Yu looked towards the eternal sea. On the other side of the sea was the desolate domain world. Emperor Qin was there. As Qin Yu gazed at the eternal sea in the distant Great Qin imperial capital, the Qin emperor suddenly opened his eyes. His figure flickered, and he appeared in the skies above Xianyang City. He looked towards the eternal sea. At this moment, Qin Yu and Emperor Qin's gazes seemed to cross endless space. They looked at each other from afar. Boom! Above the boundless eternal sea, raging waves suddenly appeared, rumbling and roaring as they charged into the distance. Qin Yu, you finally arrived. I have been waiting for a long time. Emperor Qin slowly said. He held his hands behind his back, his entire body surging with self-confidence. Just now, he had clearly felt Qin Yu's aura. Very strong, stronger than he had expected. But Emperor Qin's mind was still calm. He didn't feel the slightest ripple because of this. This was because he was Emperor Qin, the sole ruler of the desolate domain world. He was the incarnation of eternal invincibility. He would win this battle. Above the 9 realms, Qin Yu looked away. A dignified look appeared on his face. Little blue lamp. Shua. The great sun phantom appeared. Only today can you truly understand Emperor Qin's strength. As for his origin and identity, I do have some guesses, but there is no meaning in saying these things now. As long as you can win in the end, you will naturally know everything. So, if you kill Emperor Qin, you can truly open the gates to the unsurpassed path. Qin Yu, you are only one step away, but you are just like the first Tao Master. Since ancient times, in this vast world, countless people have fallen at the final step. Success seemed within reach, but in the end, they fell forever. Qin Yu lowered his head. After several breaths of time, he let out a deep breath. Good. Then let us go kill Emperor Qin now. Chapter 1849. 1 step into the eternal sea. 2 steps into the desolate domain. 3 steps into Xianyang. Swish. Qin Yu's figure appeared in the sky above Xianyang. At this moment, the world was silent. Everything was sealed by an invisible force. All the existences above the Emperor realm in the desolate domain felt fear from the bottom of their hearts. All eyes were on Xianyang. Star Sea Grotto, where the barbarian race's ancestral court was located. The Grand Shaman of Meng Mountain and Grand Shaman of Earth Fire, who were in charge of the affairs of the barbarians, changed their expressions. Your Majesty. The two looked at each other and felt the shock and excitement in their hearts. Rumble, the barbarian ancestral court shook. The scepter appeared by itself, broke the void, and disappeared. Without hesitation, the 2 grand shamans followed the aura of the scepter to Xianyang. This was the first time in countless years that the grand shamans of the barbarian race appeared in the capital of the Qin Empire. Heavenly Bull Territory, Heavenly Bull City. Niu Dingtian was shocked and murmured, "It seems that the world is going to change today." After a moment of hesitation, he moved in front of Qin Chichi. Chichi, your brother is back. Do you want to go with me? Qin Chichi nodded. I will go. If nothing went wrong, this battle would decide the future of the desolate domain. If Qin Yu died, Emperor Qin would become the true eternal ruler. Whether the Niu family could survive would be a problem. After the Qin Empire unified the desolate domain, Niu felt danger from the outside world. Of course, if Qin Yu won this battle, he would replace Emperor Qin and become the ruler of the world. Let's go. Niu exhaled. Swish, he took Qin Shiqi with him and disappeared. Incense Avenue. Min Changjing's eyes lit up. He looked at Zion Yang with a bit of bitterness in his eyes. How could he not be bitter? He had obtained a method to cultivate Incense Avenue a long time ago, but he couldn't step into it, so he had to give up. But what about Qin Yu? How long had it been? To someone like Min Changjing, who had lived for countless years, this was simply the blink of an eye. Qin Yu, who had come to ask for guidance on cultivation methods, had already transformed into a super powerhouse that had ignited his Joss flame Great Tao. On the other hand, he was still Min Changjing, trapped at the peak of the Emperor realm, unable to take another step forward. The one who causes chaos in Qin is Qin Yi. Putting everything else aside, Qin Emperor's premonition is indeed very accurate. Throwing away the fishing rod, Min Changjing took a step forward and landed in Xianyang City. Thinking about it today, those old things from back then didn't give up on being dirty with him. What was the final result of this battle? What kind of ending would it lead to? He wanted to witness it with his own eyes. The demon race, the descendants of the ancient era. The Wasteland's 4 sects and 4 families. Facing the terrifying aura that suddenly descended from above Xianyang City, everyone shuddered in fear. Then, in the next moment, he left without any hesitation. The reason was simple. This battle would determine the future of the desolate region. The winner gets everything. Those who failed would naturally have to pay with their lives. Without a doubt, this would be the most powerful battle in the history of the desolate domain. No matter what the final result was, being able to personally witness such a high-level battle was something worth being gratified about. It was worth living in the same era as the two of them. At the same time, in another great Qin. On this day, the wind and clouds surged. An incomparably powerful aura exploded from Xianyang City, turning into an invisible pillar that shot into the sky. Imperial advisor Chen Wan's face was full of excitement, and his body was trembling. Master, do you see this? This day has finally come. Emperor Qin appeared next to him, looking shocked. Imperial advisor, this is... Chen Wan took a deep breath and pointed. Your Majesty, above the sky is the real world. We are finally going to meet it. Thus, in the desolate region, above the capital of the great Qin Empire, Xianyang City, a large illusory figure appeared. The sky was like a mirror, reflecting the current Xianyang City. The two cities looked at each other from afar. However, everyone who saw the illusory figure in the sky knew that it was not a reflection, but another Xianyang City. Emperor Qin and Qin Yu were between the two Xianyang cities. Countless eyes were filled with shock and astonishment. They didn't know what this meant. However, when the two Xianyang cities looked at each other from afar, everyone understood from the bottom of their hearts. Emperor Qin and Qin Yu were destined to be mortal enemies. Today, only one of them could survive. Qin Yu. Emperor Qin was the first to speak. His tone was calm. Before this, I couldn't figure out how an existence as weak as an ant could become my enemy. But not long ago, I suddenly realized that you are my shadow. You are a demon in my heart that I must kill in order to return to my true self. Qin Yu was expressionless. Perhaps what Emperor Qin said is true, and I am indeed your shadow. He raised his hand and pointed at the sky. Or perhaps the great Qin beneath our feet is the true shadow. Emperor Qin took a step forward. With a boom, the shadow of the great Tao appeared behind him. It pierced through the heavens and the earth, releasing a vast aura that swept through the world, instantly suppressing everything. For the first time, Emperor Qin didn't hold back. He released his full aura. Countless eyes shrank, filled with shock and fear. Emperor Qin was invincible in the world. He was an undefeatable legend. All the true emperors of the desolate region knew this. However, the terrifying strength that Emperor Qin displayed today still far exceeded their expectations. Inconceivable, unrivaled. Just the release of his aura caused all the true emperors gathered outside Xianyang City to feel horrified. They weren't his match. Or to be more precise, even if all of them joined forces, they still wouldn't be a match for Emperor Qin. This was because their strength was no longer on the same level. This was a strength that surpassed the true Emperor realm. Eternal realm, long-lived species. A true emperor murmured, his voice filled with awe and envy. You're wrong. At some unknown time, Bai Feifei had appeared outside Xianyang City. She looked at the two people facing each other. They aren't at the eternal realm, nor are they long-lived species. They haven't taken a wrong path. They've always walked on the correct Great Tao. A complicated look appeared in her eyes. When Emperor Qin unified the desolate region, she hadn't been idle. She had found all the fragments of her body that had been suppressed, and now she had recovered. However, it was precisely because of this that Bai Feifei, with her status as a long-lived species, was able to see Qin Huang and Qin Yu again. She could clearly sense what it meant to be so dazzling that you couldn't look at them directly. These two people were like the two brightest stars in the sea of stars, releasing endless light. As for her, it was no longer possible for her to reach this level. This had nothing to do with potential, but because she had taken the wrong path and her great Tao had been severed. Qin Yu took a deep breath and stepped forward, facing Emperor Qin. Bang! The phantom of the great Tao shot into the sky, twisting and turning as it burned. The Nine Realms token automatically appeared. With a crack, it shattered and fused into Qin Yu's body. Because from now on, there was no need for it to exist. Qin Yu controlled the Nine Realms and was the incarnation of the Nine Realms. His aura rose once more. Emperor Qin and Qin Yu hadn't even fought, but the invisible collision of forces had already erupted. Like a raging wave, it swept outwards, causing the entire Xianyang city to shake and tremble. This aura that left one in despair represented an unimaginable strength. With a single thought, it could shatter the sea of stars. Outside Xianyang city, all the true emperors that had gathered here subconsciously retreated, their faces filled with fear. Even though, when they descended, they had intentionally distanced themselves from Qin Emperor and Qin Yu in order to avoid being sucked in. But now, the true emperors realized that they had been thinking too simply. This little safe distance was simply not enough. Niuding Tian pulled Qin Chichi back. Let's retreat a bit. Don't make a sound now. It will only affect Qin Yu. Trust your brother. He is not an impulsive person. Since he dares to come to Xianyang City, he must be confident. The next moment, the battle began. Without any hesitation, Emperor Qin punched out. The so-called one punch destroys all things refer to the scene in front of him. As Emperor Qin's punch fell, the world suddenly lost its color. An unimaginably terrifying power surged and shook. Roar! In an instant, the power of this punch turned into a majestic dragon. Its body was pitch black as if it were cast from steel. It opened its mouth, revealing its sharp fangs, and pounced at Qin Yu. What was more terrifying was that when the dragon pounced, everything shattered and collapsed. Everything in the world, including the rules. Whether it was time or space, everything lost all meaning. So the moment the dragon condensed, it appeared directly in front of Qin Yu. So the moment Qin Yu saw it, he knew that he could not avoid it. There was also an irresistible and uncontrollable fear that surged from the bottom of his heart. But soon, this fear disappeared. It was crushed into powder, and all that was left was calmness. Since he could not avoid it, then he would not avoid it. Emperor Qin was indeed strong, even stronger than expected. The reason for that was because that single punch possessed a cultivation that far surpassed the first Tao masters, shattering the rules and annihilating all things. This was a level that only a blazing sun could reach. But now, Qin Yu was also stronger. A sore cry sounded. Qin Yu raised his hand and grasped forward. The mountain river sword fell into his hand and slashed forward. And when this sword fell, Midi's figure subconsciously appeared in his mind. Only today did he truly understand that when Midi helped him refine this mountain river sword, she must have paid a great price. As for the power of the mountain and river sword, It was only today that Qin Yu was able to truly unseal its true appearance. As the sword fell, it was like mountains and rivers gathered together, the world itself. It was endlessly sharp, able to cut through all things. It was thick and heavy, able to suppress all things. The approaching dragon emitted a pained roar. Countless cracks appeared on the surface of its massive body. The cracks were extremely small, and there were so many that it was impossible to count. They covered its entire body, covering every inch of its scales. Roar! The dragon reared its head back and roared. In the next moment, its massive body shattered. But the moment the dragon shattered, Emperor Qin grasped his hand. A golden sword appeared in his hand. I also have a sword. Its name is the Son of Heaven. With this sword in hand, I am invincible in the world. Emperor Qin raised his hand, and the Son of Heaven sword slashed down. The world was instantly split in half along the blade. This wasn't an illusion. It was truly split in half by this sword. The mountain river sword blocked in front of him. With a heaven-shaking explosion, Qin Yu was forced back. His eyebrows furrowed and his face darkened. Behind him, space crazily shattered. A terrifying strength spread outwards, shattering the heavens. Qin Yu stepped forward and pointed his sword to the heavens. I know that you and Emperor Qin are one, but you had best not interfere in today's battle. Otherwise, before I kill Emperor Qin, I will first slaughter this heavenly Tao. Rumble, rumble. Above the highest heavens, a massive face appeared. Its features were blurry and indistinct. Only a pair of eyes were cold and indifferent as it looked down at Qin Yu. The mountain river sword hummed. In the next moment, the heavens collapsed and the massive face was torn apart. With a loud rumble, winds and clouds roared and a rain of blood poured down. The world shook. A terrifying aura gathered. The broken face of the heavenly Tao roared in anger. There was another sword cry. But this time, the one who attacked was not Qin Yu, but Emperor Qin. The Son of Heaven sword broke through the heavens, completely crushing the broken face of the heavenly Tao. Today is a battle between me and Qin Yu. Besides the two of us, no one can interfere. Not even the heavens. Emperor Qin's eyes were icy cold. He locked on Qin Yu. If I kill you, I will truly awaken. Qin Yu responded, Your Majesty Qin Emperor, you are also the final obstacle on my path to the unsurpassed great Tao. Ha ha! Emperor Qin laughed. Then let's see who will survive after this battle. Qin Yu nodded. Of course it will be me. Bang! The mountain river sword rose up and a trillion sword breaths erupted. In an instant, they wove together, forming a sword prison. Emperor Qin was suppressed within, but he remained calm. He grasped the golden Son of Heaven's sword and slashed forwards. The Son of Heaven's sword was invincible, able to destroy all things. This was the attribute it possessed. Supported by Emperor Qin's terrifying realm, it possessed a might that left one in despair. The sword prison shook. Countless sword breaths shattered, disintegrated, and scattered. But during this process, more sword breaths gushed out, repairing the sword prison. Although it was a bit difficult, Qin Yu had indeed temporarily trapped Emperor Qin. Bai Feifei, he shouted out loud. Outside Xianyang, Bai Feifei took a deep breath. She stepped forwards and grasped forwards. Space suddenly shattered. Rumble, rumble. Countless blazing meteorites with long tails trailing behind them flew out from the shattered space and headed straight for Xianyang. Qin Yu had to kill Emperor Qin, but he didn't believe that he could only rely on his own strength. After all, the result was the most important. As for the process, it was left for the victor to write and record. This was the capital of the great Qin Empire. If Xianyang was destroyed, Emperor Qin would definitely be affected. Both of them were existences that had stepped into the incense flame, Great Tao. They naturally knew the effects of having their faith damaged. Within the sword prison, Emperor Qin's eyes were cold. He didn't show the slightest bit of emotion because of this. At this moment, Qin Yu's eyebrows furrowed. He looked up at the skies, at the reflection of the other capital, Xianying. The meteorite had also appeared in the middle of it. It was as if the two Xianying cities had met for the first time, and then they had truly become one. Or, to put it another way, after Emperor Qin and Qin Yu began their battle, the two Xianying cities had become one. In this world, there was only one Xianying city. Thus, when Bai Feifei's meteors descended, there would also be meteors falling from the other Xianying city. "Stop!" Qin Yu shouted. Bai Feifei flicked her sleeves. Space shook, as if a great mouth had opened, swallowing up the meteors. "Qin Yu, it's useless. Xianying City has already become one. There's only one in this world. If you destroy my Xianying City, that is the same as destroying your own foundation. There is only one Xianying City and only one Emperor Qin. Don't make any more pointless attempts." Emperor Qin raised the imperial sword. "In this battle, there is only you and me. No one can interfere. If you want to win, your only choice is to kill me. There is no other choice." Qin Yu nodded. "Then I will kill you." Bang! Behind him, 9 stars appeared. These were the 9 world hearts that he had condensed. As the source of the 9 realms returned, they fused into the 9 realms. Dong! Dong! The 9 world hearts rapidly contracted and expanded. As they beat, they released an incomparably powerful strength that poured into Qin Yu's body. The mountain and river sword in his hand hummed and emitted a brilliant light. He lifted his hand and slashed. The sword prison instantly twisted. Countless sealed sword breaths erupted, blotting out the skies as they crashed towards Emperor Qin. Chapter 1850. Qin Emperor lifted his hand. The Emperor's sword cried out, and golden divine light erupted, as if a great sun had appeared. All of the falling sword breaths sank into the great golden sun and evaporated, unable to approach him at all. At this time, Qin Emperor erupted with an even greater strength. His eyes were cold and callous. "It is useless. I am invincible in this world. In this world, there is no one that can defeat me, much less kill me. Qin Yu, accept your fate. The reason you have cultivated to this day and become strong is all so that you can become a qualified whetstone in front of me. Once you are broken, I can unravel all the puzzles in my heart and become a master of my own destiny." Qin Yu frowned. He could clearly feel that Qin Emperor had erupted with a strength far greater than before. Otherwise, there was no reason for him to use the power of the 9 realms and still not be able to shake Qin Emperor at all. "Little blue lamp, what is going on?" After a brief silence, the little blue lamp's thoughts fluctuated. "Qin Yu, do you still not understand? The stronger you are, the stronger Qin Emperor is. It is not that he is hiding his strength. The two of you are the same person. I am Qin Emperor's shadow. That is not important." The little blue lamp's voice was calm. "Because right now, you and Qin Emperor stand at the same height. Whoever can kill the other and become the final victor will naturally become the true Qin Yu. If you die, there will still be a you in this world, but it will no longer be you. I hope that you can understand." Qin Yu frowned. "I don't understand, nor do I need to understand, because I absolutely will not die. Shadow? Heart demon? Fuck you. I am Qin Yu, the only Qin Yu in this world." Bang! The mountain and river sword erupted. Qin Yu stepped forwards, his figure as fast as lightning, as he instantly engaged Qin Emperor in battle. 2 people, 2 swords. The aura they released was like an invisible giant hand that easily tore apart the heavens. The world collapsed and shattered. Terrifying fluctuations swept out in all directions, causing the world to tremble and tremble. Outside of Xianying City, the true sovereign that had arrived began to rapidly retreat, the horror in his eyes becoming increasingly heavy. To the people of the world, the true sovereign was the absolute peak of cultivation, someone they could only look at but never reach. But today's battle in Xianying City had clearly announced to the world that although the true sovereign was strong, he was only a starting point for those that chased after a higher realm of the great Tao. Qin Emperor and Qin Yu had obviously stepped into a higher level of existence, and they possessed the strength to truly destroy the world. The true emperors turned pale, and their eyes were filled with fear. They couldn't help but be worried. Once the battle before them completely affected the surroundings, it was very likely that this world wouldn't be able to endure it before the outcome was decided, and it would completely collapse. Far away in the void, Dubby smiled. He had already locked onto the aura of the other blazing sun fragment. In fact, he had already noticed it a long time ago. But for some reason, there seemed to be a force interfering with his judgment, which was why it had been delayed until now. But it didn't matter. As long as he locked onto the other party, he could cross this distance with a single thought. After searching for countless years, I finally found you. Light shot out of Dubby's eyes. The void in front of him shook. The illusionary image of the sea of confusion was twisted and torn apart by a strong force. He took a step forward and was about to step into it. However, at that moment, Heaven's pivot stopped in midair, frowning as he looked across at Meng Hao. Little Meaty was very calm. Right now, you can't go over yet. Dubby said, you were the one who obstructed my senses earlier, right? Little Meaty nodded. That's right. Just who are you? Faint vibrations spread out from Dubby's body. You were also the one who dragged me deep into the void before. Little Meaty said, if you want to chat, I will be happy to accompany you. No, Dubby said, let's attack. He raised his hand. The empty void of realms suddenly became as heavy as a mountain. At this time, it was like a million mountains had arrived, suppressing everything. Little Meaty coldly sneered. As you wish. Wait a moment. A phantom appeared. With a flick of his sleeves, he erased the terrifying strength that had descended from the void. He rubbed his temples, his tone helpless. You all are too boring. Do you really think I am easy to bully? Little Meaty's eyes were ice cold. When she attacked, you chose to take a step back. But when I attacked, you have this attitude. Are you looking down on me? The phantom was silent for several breaths of time. Are you going to act shamelessly again? Little Meaty coldly sneered again and again. Will you accept or not? In any case, I wasn't the one who signed the bet, so it's better to tear it apart. That way, no one will have any scruples. The phantom forced a smile. All right, don't act recklessly. He looked at Dub. You can wait a little longer in the void. Dubby furrowed his eyebrows and slowly nodded. He didn't know who the phantom in front of him was. In fact, he couldn't even feel the least bit of a formidable aura from this person. But just now, with a flick of the phantom's sleeves, Dubby had scattered all his preparations and attacked with all his strength. The might of this attack was inconceivable. And there was also this strange woman across from him. Although Dubby had already broken through her obstruction once, facing Little Meaty today, he still felt a threat, an intense one. It was as if right now, in front of him, there was a gaping maw filled with sharp fangs that flashed with a heart-palpitating light. As soon as Dubby stepped into it, it would send him on his way. After obtaining a fragment of a blazing sun and cultivating until now, Dubby felt that he wasn't much weaker than a true blazing sun. But today, these two people in front of him, no, one person and one shadow, he couldn't see through them. Dubby chose to retreat. The phantom turned around. You won. I didn't look down on you. I also took a step back. But what I said to her before, I will say it to you again today. This will be the last time, otherwise I really will fall out with you. Little Meaty sneered. If you want to fall out with me, then so be it. If you were afraid, you wouldn't be in such a state right now. Of course you aren't afraid. The phantom's tone was calm. He didn't reveal any anger because of Little Meaty's stubbornness. But Chin will die. After a brief pause, he continued to say, his soul will scatter and he will thoroughly vanish. There will be no chance of resurrection. Don't argue with me, because you know that it isn't difficult for me to do this. And I have always been responsible for the words I say. In other words, I do what I say. The phantom was a chatterbox. He spouted a lot of nonsense in a single breath. But Little Meaty's face revealed a dignified expression. This was because she was well aware of just how terrifying this phantom was. He said these nonsense words not because he had a guilty conscience, but because he was seriously warning her not to do it a second time. Very well, I agree. The phantom smiled. I know that you and she are both very reasonable people. Then, let us make an agreement. The final result will be left to the will of the heavens. No one will interfere, otherwise everyone will suffer misfortune together. Little Meaty coldly snorted. She turned and vanished from sight. Before Dubhy could speak, he was interrupted by the phantom. Don't ask. Asking is a waste of energy. As for the grievance and resentment in your heart, you should put it away as soon as possible. Because even if you really become the ruler of the blazing suns, you still won't have the chance to take revenge. It's simple if you don't believe me. You can try when the time comes. In any case, as long as the blazing suns reunite and Cheney doesn't win, that's fine. As for who becomes the ruler of the blazing suns in the end, it is all the same to me. Dubhy remained silent. The phantom faintly smiled and then dispersed. Deep in the void, there was only Dubhy left. He could still clearly feel the aura of the other blazing sun fragment. With just a thought, he could directly descend. But at this time, he felt as if he were shouldering a mountain. With the myriad heavens and 10,000 worlds in front of him, he simply couldn't take a single step forward. He had to admit that he felt fear. But looking at the myriad heavens and 10,000 worlds, there were 9 blazing suns that illuminated the world. He was about to become the ruler of the blazing suns. So why was there still an existence that made him feel a fatal threat? Suddenly, Dubhy stiffened. His pupils shrank, and a look of amazement appeared in his eyes. This was because he suddenly realized something. That was, why could he become the new ruler of the blazing suns? This seemed like an unreasonable question, but the truth was that the more he thought about it, the more he thought about it. Between the heavens and earth, there were 9 blazing suns that shined, and 9 blazing suns ruled. In order for a new ruler to appear, there needed to be a vacancy in one of the 9 people that stood at the peak. The ruler of the blazing suns coexisted with the heavens and earth, transcending the rules. They were the true, unsurpassed existences of all arts. They had already transcended the shackles of life and didn't have the problem of their lifespans drying up. Then, there was only one answer. They had been killed by someone else. Only then would there be a vacancy. Great Qin Xianyang. The slaughter continued. At this time, there seemed to be an invisible strength covering the battlefield where the 2 people were, eliminating the destructive fluctuations so that they didn't spread out. Otherwise, the huge island floating in the eternal sea of the great desolate world would have been smashed into pieces by this battle. They were equally matched, and it was hard to tell who was better. This was the most fitting description for this life-or-death battle between Qin Emperor and Qin Yu. Both of them were very strong and possessed the strength to crush Emperor Realm cultivators. However, none of them were able to gain the upper hand against each other. The mountain and river sword in Qin Yu's hands still shined with a dazzling radiance, releasing a trillion destructive sword breaths. But his eyes became increasingly dark. Whether he believed the little blue lamp's words or not, they were facts placed in front of him. He and the Qin Emperor were each other's shadows. It was a situation where one was stronger than the other. Unless one side was resigned to death, neither could kill the other. But naturally, no one would take the initiative to seek death. This was a great battle that seemed to have no end, but it was crazily consuming Qin Yu's strength. And to Qin Yu, this sort of loss was very small. It could mean an unavoidable disaster of destruction. Qin Yu, the master of the other blazing sun fragment, has arrived. The little blue lamp's voice sounded out. The blazing sun fragments could sense each other. When Dubhy locked on a Qin Yu, the little blue lamp also sensed him. Although he didn't know why the other side hadn't arrived yet, if this battle were to continue, then even if victory and defeat were decided in the end, the victor would be on the verge of collapse. At that time, facing Dubhy, there would be no chance of victory. Qin Yu's eyes erupted with a sharp light. Bang! The mountain river sword was heavier, faster. Across from him, Qin Emperor laughed. Qin Yu, you are worried, but I am not. I have enough time to slowly consume you bit by bit. Over the endless years, I have accumulated far more than you. You will never be able to kill me. Qin Yu's sword was even faster. Don't be provoked by him and expose your own flaws. I know. Qin Yu's voice was calm. Little blue lamp, Qin Emperor is right. I have no way to kill him. The little blue lamp was silent. So, I have decided to take a gamble. What do you want to do? I want Qin Emperor to kill himself. Qin Yu looked up at the skies, at the other Xianyang city. He suddenly let go. The mountain river sword fell to the earth. Astonishment flashed in Qin Emperor's eyes, but it disappeared in an instant. He didn't know what had happened, but he absolutely wouldn't miss out on such an excellent opportunity. Bang! The Emperor's sword was like a great golden sun, erupting with its greatest might. A terrifying sword aura condensed to the point of nearly substantiality, turning into a golden beam of light that rumbled towards Qin Yu. In an instant, his figure was submerged in the golden beam of light. The blazing nine bends great Tao that connected the heavens and earth began to break apart and decompose. At the same time, the nine world hearts that appeared gradually stopped beating. Between the heavens and earth, Qin Yu's aura completely vanished. Beneath the attack of the Emperor's sword, he vanished into thin air. Ha ha! Qin Emperor laughed, his voice shaking the heavens. I am invincible in this world. No one can defeat me. Qin Yu, once I kill you, I will no longer be a shadow. That's right. Qin Emperor already knew that he was Qin Yu's shadow. He knew this before they even fought. But so what? He, the shadow, had the last laugh. If Qin Yu died, then he would no longer be a shadow. In the void realm, the phantom frowned, a trace of helplessness flashing in his eyes. He sighed softly, as expected of someone who had been chosen by her. It would not be so easy to kill him. The Battle of Xianyang was a dead end. It was naturally for the best that Qin Yu was killed. He had won this bet, and even if he won in the end, he would still be weak and on the verge of collapse. But no matter what, the Phantom never imagined that Qin Yu would use such a method to break out of this dead end. Qin Emperor was indeed invincible in this world. No one could kill him. This wasn't just because he was Qin Yu's shadow, but also because when Qin Emperor was reborn, he was bestowed this attribute. However, there was a loophole in this rule, namely, nobody could kill the Qin Emperor except for himself. It was troublesome to explain. In short, if Qin Yu died in battle, he would be killed passively. Then he would truly die. Otherwise, the Qin Emperor would kill himself. The Phantom shook his head. He couldn't understand why Qin Yu dared to make such a bet. Did he really trust Little Meat that much? In the skies, there was another great Qin reflected. Far away from Xianyang, in the ancestral land of the great Qin Empire, there was a great tomb with the most ancient and highest status. All of a sudden, a tremor erupted from the depths of the earth. The tomb directly shattered. Mud and stones flew everywhere, revealing a giant coffin buried deep underground. At this moment, with a creaking sound, the coffin was pushed open from the inside. Qin Yu stepped out. He looked up at the skies, and just as Qin Yu's gaze fell, the laughing Qin Emperor in Xianyang City came to an abrupt stop. He frowned, revealing a puzzled look. He looked down at his chest. Where his heart was, there was a transparent hole. Kacha! Kacha! There was a cracking sound. With the hole in his chest, as the center, cracks rapidly spread outwards. Soon, they covered his entire body, every inch and corner. Qin Emperor's frown deepened. We, our Qin Emperor, we will never be defeated. I will never die forever. Who? A gust of wind blew past. Qin Emperor turned into powder, disappearing with the wind. Chapter 1851. Outside Xianyang City, Qin Chichi's face was pale. She stared blankly at the scene before her and suddenly screamed in pain. Brother! Emperor Qin was dead, but Qin Yu had disappeared as well. It was as if this great war had ended in mutual destruction. She took a few steps forward and stared blankly at the empty Xianyang City. Her body trembled. No way. No way. Qin Yu had said that he would take care of her and protect her from harm in the future. How could he die? He could not die. Your Majesty, Mengshan and Terraflame, The two grand magi knelt on the ground in grief. The barbarians had waited for countless years, and the new emperor had finally passed away. With the death of the barbarian emperor, the barbarians would fall into the endless abyss and continue to suffer. Neo Dingtian frowned. He glanced at Qin Shichi's back, but did not say anything. Because the truth was right in front of him. Qin Yu was dead. The great path had collapsed, and his aura had dissipated. There was nothing left. Even a true emperor would not be able to survive. He died just like that. Min Changjing frowned and murmured. Didn't they say that a scourge lives for 1,000 years? Qin Yu did not look like he would die young. Hell, what a pity. Outside Xianyang City, there was silence. Everyone had their own thoughts. Some felt pain and sorrow, but most of them felt joy and relief from the bottom of their hearts. Because the power that Emperor Qin and Qin Yu had unleashed in this battle was too strong. It was so strong that the true emperors could only tremble and despair. There was no way they could fight back. No matter who survived today's battle, they would undoubtedly become the true ruler of the wasteland domain. Even the true emperors who thought of themselves as the best chess players in the world had to bow down to them. The two of them had died together. Great! To the true emperors, this was the best ending. After all, no one wanted to be controlled by others. This was especially true for these true emperors who were used to ascending to the highest level and not being bound by anything. Bai Fei frowned. Looking at the place where Emperor Qin had died, a strange look appeared in her eyes. It was as if he had seen something inconceivable. Or it could be said that at this moment, at the moment of Qin Huang's death, she finally recalled some things. So that's how it is. Another great Qin. Outside the arch tomb, the space suddenly shook, and the image of a great sun appeared. The little blue lamp had a complex look in his eyes. He looked at Qin Yu. You trust her so much? What if he really died? He knew that little Meaty had left behind this backup plan. But from the start, the little blue lamp hadn't mentioned this, because there truly was a great deal of risk involved. Death was death. It was something that could not be tried or changed. If he was dead, perhaps he was really dead. From then on, it disappeared and no longer existed. Qin Yu had a calm expression. He smiled and said, I told you before, my luck has always been extremely good. Furthermore, she's little Meaty. Even to this day, I still haven't been able to completely figure out her true identity. However, if I'm still unable to completely trust her, then my life will be too pitiful. Let the public know. Source Changer app, it's really good. It's worth installing. After all, there are many book sources and the books are updated quickly. After a brief silence, the little blue lamp said, Congratulations, you've succeeded. Qin Yu nodded. I know. Qin Huang had died. He was invincible in the world, invincible. So, in the end, Qin Huang had personally killed himself. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The earth shook and a terrifying aura shook the world. Between the two great Qins, they released a powerful swallowing aura that pulled them closer. They were about to fuse together. In this world, there was only one Qin Yu, and there was only one great Qin. But at this time, Qin Yu made an unexpected decision. He lifted his hand and grasped. The fusing process of the two worlds suddenly came to a standstill. The little blue lamp frowned. You don't have much time. The master of the other blazing sun fragment had already locked onto this place and could descend with a single thought. Only by fusing the two great Qins together would Qin Yu possess an even greater strength. In this world, there is only one Emperor Qin, so there will only be one great Qin. Qin Yu slowly said, But I am not Emperor Qin. The great sun phantom shook. The little blue lamp revealed a thoughtful expression. It looked around and then slowly nodded after several breaths of time. Qin Yu, what you said is correct. Since Qin Yu wasn't Emperor Qin, then whether it was one great Qin or two great Qins, what would he do? Even if, after the two great Qins fused together, Qin Yu would become stronger. But this would also add the label of Emperor Qin to him. Whether he wanted to accept it or not, this would become an unchangeable fact. And what Qin Yu rejected was this label. There was no reason, but Qin Yu instinctively didn't want to become Emperor Qin. In the void boundary, the phantom looked down at the desolate domain world and sighed once more. He had miscalculated again today. Qin was truly worthy of being someone she had chosen. His fate was different from the rest, always surpassing all expectations. If Qin became Emperor Qin, then there would be no doubt about the great war that followed. This was because if Great Qin ceased to exist, then Emperor Qin would naturally dissipate. The phantom shook his head, a helpless look on his face. He flicked his sleeves, and the void boundary began to shake. Go, it's your turn to appear. On the other side of the void boundary, Dubhe, who had been waiting in silence, raised his head at this moment. He heard the sound and felt the resistance in front of him had disappeared. It was time for him to make his move. Without any hesitation, Dubhe took a step and his figure instantly disappeared. The next moment, the entire desolate domain world suddenly sank at this moment. Rumble. The sky was shaking and shattering. Countless terrifying cracks spread wildly in all directions from where Dubhe had descended. They were like the mouths of giant beasts that could devour everything in the world. The billions of living beings in the world all felt an incomparably powerful and irresistible pressure that came from above their heads, pressing down on their minds and souls. Outside Xianyang City, Qin Qi's face turned pale. Not only her, but Niu Dingtan, who was next to her, was also horrified. All the true Emperor Realm experts felt the incomparably terrifying pressure coming from the sky. Terrifying, powerful, and irresistible. It was even more astonishing than the power that had erupted during the battle between Emperor Qin and Qin Yu. It was like an ancient fiend god between heaven and earth, shouldering the sun, the moon, and the stars, stepping on the stars in the sky. At this moment, Dubhe had descended. Bai Feifei's expression was calm. She looked into the distance, and there was not the slightest fluctuation in her eyes. It was as if she had already predicted what would happen in front of her. Rumble. The majestic immortal will was like an earth-shattering tide that instantly swept across the desolate domain world. Even the eternal sea was covered by it. Qin Yu. Dubhe's bellow resounded through the entire world like divine thunder. The eyes of the true emperors were wide open. Their faces were filled with shock and bewilderment. Was this powerful existence that had suddenly descended like an ancient fiend god looking for Qin Yu? But he was already dead. Just now, right in front of their eyes. How could a dead person be found? Bai Feifei looked up at the sky above her. Min Zhongjing's face showed a hint of surprise. He had also sensed it. Niu Dingtian grabbed the heartbroken and blank Qin Qiqi. Look at the sky, look at the sky. The reflection of the other Xianyang city in the sky suddenly shook violently, as if a large stone had been thrown into a lake. A figure walked out of the waves. His expression was extremely calm, and his every movement made the world tremble. Brother, Qin Qiqi exclaimed. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Qin Yu glanced at her and smiled. Qiqi, don't worry. I'm fine. His sister was watching, and today, with so many people outside Xianyang City, Qiqi's identity had already been exposed. If he failed, his sister would also fall into a very tragic situation with him, right? No, perhaps at that time, it would be easier for him to be killed. Therefore, such an ending could not be allowed. Qin Yu looked up into the sky. Even though he was very far away, he could still clearly feel the aura from Dubhe, as well as the blazing heat and greed of the other blazing sun on his body. Little blue lamp, are you afraid? The little blue lamp said yes. Qin Yu was startled and then chuckled. You little guy, after so many years, this is the first time I've heard the word afraid come out of your mouth. He paused for a moment and then continued. But this is nothing to be ashamed of because I am also afraid. Although I already died once when I killed Emperor Qin, there is still a big difference between a real death and a fake death. What nonsense! The little blue lamp bluntly said. Qin Yu said, even if it's nonsense, you should at least listen to it. Perhaps after today, you won't be able to hear it again. You don't have confidence? I do, Qin Yu smiled. But this is just a habit of mine. I like to imagine the worst possible situation. Now, let us ascend to the heavens and fight with everything we have. As his words fell, Qin Yu stepped forwards. Bang! Space twisted, swallowing up his figure. In the next moment, another terrifying aura was released from the highest heavens. The simplest way to describe it was that another divinity demon had descended into the world. Chinyu had a calm expression. He looked at Dubhe and said, "We finally meet." Dubhe nodded. "I have been waiting for this day for a long time." The two wielders of the blazing suns were well aware that there was no room for reconciliation between them. Thus, there was no need to continue and waste time. In the next moment, two suns descended. A terrifying aura swept through the world. The powerful aura that belonged to the blazing suns covered everyone within. The world fell deathly silent. There was no longer any sound. It wasn't just the true sovereigns that had gathered in Xianyang City, but the entire desolate domain. It even radiated into the distant barbarian territory, reaching above the eternal sea. Around all living beings, space and time came to a standstill. It was similar to being sealed in ice. They were completely suppressed, unable to move at all. The vast and boundless eternal sea fell silent. This was the might of the blazing suns. Wherever they descended, the rules would come to a standstill. With a single thought, they could change the heavens and earth. With a single thought, they could erase all life. Dubhe lifted a hand. "I say, there should be a sea of stars in this world." Above their heads, the skies turned pitch black. Then, motes of stars began to appear from within. Although it looked like an illusory image, this river of stars gave off an ancient, boundless feeling. With just a single glance, one could feel the endless vicissitudes of time. "I say, in the sea of stars, there should be a star that perishes today." In the pitch-black skies, there were countless motes of stars. One of them suddenly lit up, releasing endless light. It was so dazzling that it illuminated the entire region. Then, when it was at its brightest, it suddenly shattered. Countless star fragments mixed with a terrifying might shot out in all directions. "I say, the essence of the star fragments, obey my will. Condense into a god-slaying spear and descend into this world." A star fragment suddenly erupted with a terrifying aura. It was originally incomparably far away from the desolate domain, but at this moment, it was summoned and directly descended. The star fragment rapidly extended, turning into a 100,000-foot-long divine spear. The spear tip was burning, and under the raging flames, it illuminated the strange patterns and released an aura that made one's heart shake. "I say, the god-slaying spear will descend. It will pierce through your chest, pierce through your heart, sever all life, and annihilate every piece of your soul." Whoosh! The 100,000-foot god-slaying spear had arrived. Chinyu said, "I don't agree." He lifted his hand and punched out. Boom! Fist and spear tip collided. This was a direct confrontation between the wills of the two blazing suns that wielded the star fragments. There was an earth-shattering explosion. The terrifying ring-shaped shockwave was no longer as simple as it could be seen with the naked eye. It was as if it could split the heavens and earth, sweeping in all directions. Everything was directly turned into powder under this impact. Whether it was the heavens or the earth or all living beings in this world, it was different. This was a true battle of destruction, a battle at the level of the blazing suns. Poof! Flesh and blood shattered, revealing the white bones underneath. Then, as it trembled, fine cracks appeared. The finger bones were collapsing, but at the same time, the raging flames on the surface of the god-slaying spear were quickly extinguished. On the spear tip, the complex and strange patterns twisted, constantly cracking and disappearing. Boom! The god-slaying spear shattered. Chinyu took a step forward. "Ancient!" he shouted in a low voice, towering like an ancient fiend god, supporting the heavens and earth. Chinyu didn't need it, because he was a true ancient fiend god. The ancient race was undoubtedly a fiend god existence in the universe. It was a true fiend god that shouldered the sun, moon, and stars, and stepped on the stars of the universe. At this moment, although he wasn't a complete blazing sun, his will still had the attributes of a blazing sun. Just now, When Dubhe summoned the god-slaying spear, this was also the case. At this time, as Qin Yu shouted out loud, towering figures that supported the heavens began to appear. They opened their eyes, confusion on their faces. But when the ancients saw Qin Yu, they naturally understood everything. The ancients revealed pleasantly surprised smiles, as well as pride and gratification. Although they had died, the ancients hadn't been severed. No matter how far into the future, their bloodline would bloom with an even brighter light. Ancient, with loud shouts, these ancient race figures that supported the heavens howled as they fused into Qin Yu's body. With loud, crackling sounds, his flesh and blood began to explode. His body rapidly grew and expanded. An ancient, boundless, and powerful aura erupted from Qin Yu's body. It swept out, covering the heavens and earth. Because at this time, Qin Yu had become the incarnation of an ancient. His body was 1,000,000 feet tall, his feet stepping on the earth, and his head soaring into the highest heavens. With a thought, the ancient god armor automatically appeared. The fragments automatically covered Qin Yu's body. With loud cracking sounds, they rapidly assembled. This was a true divine tool of the ancient race. As long as the ancient race didn't perish, as long as their bloodline continued, as long as their spirit and will remained, they would never be destroyed. He lifted a hand, and the ancient divine spear fell into his palm. He fiercely waved it, and flames ignited with a loud bang. These blazing flames came from the blazing sun, so they possessed the attributes of a blazing sun. Qin Yu lifted his hand, and the ancient divine spear thrust out. With this spear, the world seemed to lose all meaning in front of it. It was like a thin piece of paper that was easily pierced through. Rules, all things, everything would be destroyed. Where the spear point pointed, there was only emptiness. Dubhe lifted a hand. I say, in the 3,000 great worlds, with trillions of stars added to my body, 10,000 tribulations cannot touch me, eternally existing between the heavens and earth. Wherever the finger fell, space surged. The ancient divine spear stabbed into this space. It continued to break through at an astonishing speed, tearing apart everything in its path. But it couldn't approach Dubhe at all. No, it should be said that the ancient divine spear was still approaching. It was just that its speed was far too slow, so slow that it was unimaginable. At this speed, it wouldn't be able to cross this space in 100,000 years. Pa! Pa! Faint cracking sounds constantly echoed out from within. Dust-sized particles were pierced through by the spear point and crushed to pieces. Every speck of dust was now a star in the starry sea. Qin Yu could even see countless lives living on these tiny stars. At this time, their eyes were wide open and their faces were filled with horror and horror. They looked at the terrifying ancient divine spear that came crashing down from the heavens, occupying the skies and destroying all things. In an instant, it shattered the stars and severed all life, creating endless slaughter. Strictly speaking, these tiny stars and the lives living on them were all illusory existences. They were formed by the will of the blazing sun, manifesting supernatural powers with a thought. But at this time, they were real. In this tiny space, countless stars were destroyed and shattered. This was a war at the level of the blazing sun. It was also because of this that the blazing sun had never truly appeared in the endless years. This was because their level had already surpassed the imagination of the world. Perhaps just a slightly heavy breath could cause a calamity of destruction. Chapter 1852. Qin Yu frowned. Dubhe was the one who wielded the fragment of the blazing sun. His boundary was unfathomable, and his strength was terrifying. He had already expected this, but his opponent's supernatural powers still left him feeling as if they were mysterious and obscure. Word become law. Was this the power of the blazing sun? It was a bit too unbelievable, but what happened in front of him proved that this was the truth. Wrong. The little blue lamp's voice sounded out. Words become law is only one of the abilities of the blazing sun. But remember, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid because you also have what he has and you already have the qualifications to use it. Qin Yu's eyes brightened. You're saying? It's as you think. Qin Yu looked at Dubhe and gripped the ancient divine spear. Nothing can stop my spear. Everyone, scatter. As his voice fell, an invisible wool was released. The dust particles in front of the spear trembled and then quietly disappeared. Without warning, they disappeared. Even space itself disappeared, leaving behind only a pitch-black void. Although the two were incomplete, they were still at the level of the blazing sun, creating a terrifying scene of annihilation. And this was only the beginning. Once annihilation began, it wouldn't stop. The pitch-black void continued to spread outwards. It was swallowing up the world. Or, to put it more bluntly, annihilation was pushing the desolate domain towards destruction, pulling it into the abyss. In the blink of an eye, it had spread to a radius of 10 feet. Then it continued to spread outwards faster and faster. Soon, a corner of the sky was missing, forming a giant black spot. Qin Yu shouted, Niu Ding Tian, take Chi-Chi and leave. Outside Xianyang City, Niu Ding Tian didn't hesitate. He grabbed Qin Chi-Chi and stepped through space, disappearing from sight. The other true sovereigns paled and turned to flee. At this moment, their hearts were filled with panic and fear, constantly attacking their minds. The black spot in the sky didn't seem obvious, but to the true sovereigns, it represented a fatal threat. This was because the world was trembling and groaning. It was filled with fear and despair. Dubby looked in the direction that Niu Ding Tian had left. Qin Yu had a faint expression. Your guess is correct. The girl beside him is someone I care about. Using the might of a blazing sun to lock onto Niu Ding Tian is an extremely easy matter. However, if you try to do anything to her, I will immediately shatter this world and escape into the void. Then, I will find your hometown and kill everyone you care about. I don't believe you'll run away. Heaven's pivot looked calm. But I'll accept your threat and let her go. However, I am a person who holds a grudge. After you die, I will find her. Qin Yu held the ancient divine spear in his hand. Then we'll talk after you kill me. Bang! The spear swept out, but this time around, it was different. The ancient god spear had been infused with the blazing sun will. Heaven's pivot lifted a hand and pointed forward. This time, it didn't erupt with any aura fluctuations. Instead, another black dot of annihilation appeared in the sky. Soon, the entire sky turned pitch black and void, representing absolute destruction and death. Two suns appeared, and the power of blazing suns continuously clashed and exploded. The little blue lamp had just said that speaking the law was only one of the abilities possessed by the blazing sun-wielding power. Qin Yu soon understood the meaning behind these words. When the void covered the two of them, Heaven's pivot lifted a hand. Extreme Ice Seal. The black nothingness formed by annihilation began to rapidly freeze. An invisible chill spread out, echoing in his soul. Kacha, kacha, kacha. Tiny sounds that weren't particularly loud. But he could feel that his body was rapidly becoming sluggish, as if he were a rusty machine. Even the speed at which his thoughts turned began to slow down. The little blue lamp's voice was calm. Before the blazing sun-wielding power, there were also wars. But these wars generally didn't affect too large a scope, otherwise they would trigger the descent of the rules. The rules here might be a bit difficult for you to understand. They are indeed the rules you see in front of you, the rules you can touch, but they are also different. This is because they are the derivation source of the rules. You can even consider them the creator of the heavens and earth. In short, in the battles between the blazing sun-wielding power, they need to open up a special battlefield. You can call this the annihilation domain, and that is the dark nothingness you are currently in. Qin Yu's reaction was a beat too slow. Although the little blue lamp's voice was calm, when he mentioned this word, he was able to detect the emotions in it. The little blue lamp said, Your reaction is very sharp, but regarding this matter, it won't be too late to consider it after you truly become the blazing sun wielding power. What I want to tell you is that once the battlefield is established, only then will the battle between the two of you truly begin. Extreme Ice Seal is a high-level method of using the power of the blazing sun. It can create an absolute low temperature that can freeze everything. If it weren't for this moment, I would have helped you offset the vast majority of the low temperature damage, and you'd have already turned into a block of ice. But even I wouldn't be able to last too long in this state. So, Qin Yu's thoughts slowed. The little blue lamp said, "So, you must familiarize yourself with the power of the blazing sun as soon as possible and find a way to break it." I can't." The little blue lamp was silent for a moment. "Although I don't want to admit it, you can think of me as a large energy source. I can display some abilities that I instinctively possess, but in a battle of the same level, these abilities aren't too useful. And you're the key to mobilizing all of this strength. After igniting your Joss flames and smelting the 9 realms, you already have the qualifications. Yes, you can only rely on yourself to explore and grasp it." The little blue lamp said, "Perhaps you don't realize it, but the truth is that your thoughts and the speed at which you speak have become a great deal slower. Qin Yu, remember that you are the blazing sun wielding power. In this world, there are only things you don't dare to think about, but there are no things you can't do." The little blue lamp fell silent. It really was mobilizing all of its strength to help Qin Yu resist the omnipresent cold that came from the annihilating nothingness. It was terrifying to the extreme. Even so, it inevitably caused the great sun that represented Qin Yu to constantly dim in this annihilating nothingness. In this world, there are only things you don't dare to think about, but there are no things you can't do. Qin Yu's thoughts raced. He felt that the little blue lamp's words were the key to breaking through today's predicament. The annihilating nothingness spread out. The black spot that had appeared in the skies had now swallowed up half the skies. It constantly fell down until it finally touched the earth. The Great Qin's imperial capital, Xianyang, was the most magnificent and prosperous city in the world. It was the symbol of the Great Qin Empire's strength. But now, it seemed as if it had been bitten by a great beast. A piece was missing from its mouth, and another piece. Then it forever vanished from the world. All that was left behind was an incomparably deep pit. And this pit, as the annihilating nothingness continued to spread, it also continued to expand and deepen. One after another, streaks of light rushed out of Xianyang City, desperately fleeing into the distance. Some could escape, but most couldn't. As the annihilating nothingness chased them down, they were swallowed up and instantly vanished. At this moment, the heavens and earth were suffering a catastrophe. Far in the distance, within the endless sea of stars, the towering body of the ancient race was holding up the sacred palace. Above the throne, the blazing sun wielder opened his eyes. Countless bolts of thunder seemed to flash through them, sweeping through the heavens. Today, since the blazing sun wielder is fighting for the throne, I will go and watch the battle. There was nothing in the temple, but the blazing sun wielder knew that he had arrived. This was because he was omnipresent to begin with. Very well. A calm voice sounded out in the temple. The blazing sun wielder stood up. As he moved, the blazing sun phantom behind the temple began to shine brightly. Vigorous rays of light instantly pierced through the endless space, illuminating the sea of stars and causing the trillions of stars to lose their splendor. In the next moment, the blazing sun in the temple vanished from sight, and in the skies above the desolate domain, within the annihilating nothingness that seemed to cover the world, another great sun phantom appeared. It seemed to be extremely far away, so its light wasn't dazzling. In fact, it even gave off a pale and icy feeling. But this meant that the blazing sun wielder had arrived. His eyes fell on the two people fighting, but most of his attention was focused on Qin Yu. At this time, the blazing sun wielder from the divine palace suddenly frowned. Anger and alarm appeared in his eyes. Shua, a figure appeared beside him, less than 10 feet away. "You are her." The blazing sun wielder shouted out loud. His eyes were filled with anger and also a great deal of fear. Meaty coldly sneered. What a blind thing. How long has it been since we last met, and you already don't recognize me? Is this considered an offense? I think it's fine. So if I wanted to teach you a lesson, it wouldn't be too excessive. A phantom appeared, blocking in front of Meaty. We agreed that before the result is decided, neither of us will do anything. Meaty said, I didn't interfere in their battle. The phantom didn't fall for this. Who knows if you will make a mistake or if some other accident occurs. After all, you've already used this sort of trick more than once. Meaty furrowed her eyebrows. She seriously thought for a moment. Did I? The phantom humphed. Either we quietly watch and wait on the side, or we turn hostile. I'll give you the choice. Meaty curled her lips. Then let's watch. It's as if I'm afraid. The blazing sun sneered. Even if Qin Yu hastily obtained the qualifications to use the blazing sun, however, he had not learned how to use the abilities he currently possessed. In this final battle, it seems as if both sides are on the same level, but the truth is that victory and defeat have already been decided from the very start. I'll say it one more time. This old lady will teach you a lesson. Meaty didn't even turn her head. If you don't believe me, you can try. The choice is yours. The blazing sun's face darkened, but he didn't continue. An incomplete her wasn't worthy of a blazing sun's dread. But this wasn't the key point, because even if she wasn't complete, she was still her. She was truly eternal and inextinguishable, an existence that existed for all time, an existence that would one day return. So, there was no advantage to truly turning hostile with her. Schwa. Another blazing sun appeared in the annihilating nothingness. A woman in a long red dress appeared. Her aura was like fire, but her face was as cold as ice. Greetings, returning ruins. She bowed towards the phantom. Returning ruins nodded. Red Sea rise. Red Sea stood up. His eyes fell on Meaty's body. Your aura has disappeared for a long time. I thought you had perished, but I never imagined that I would see you again today. What a pity. Meaty narrowed her eyes. You damned woman, you actually didn't explode and die. I'm also puzzled. A dark red light appeared in the depths of Red Sea's eyes. Many years ago, I received your guidance and benefited greatly from it. If there is a chance in the future, I hope that you won't be stingy with your guidance. Meaty smiled. What? Do you think that now that your chest has grown larger, you have the qualifications to challenge me? Do you want to repay the enmity of me plucking you naked and throwing you in a lava to bathe in? Save your breath. Even if you doubled in size, you still wouldn't have the slightest chance. Red Sea didn't speak. The dark red in his eyes deepened and his aura flowed around him, as if he wanted to burn the annihilating void. Enough, Returning Ruins said. Red Sea, do not be rude to Returning Ruins. Today, we are all spectators. No one can interfere in the struggle for the new, blazing sun. Yes. Red Sea bowed and drew back several steps. Meaty revealed a look of disappointment. She thought that this big-chested, brainless fellow had indeed made some progress. She hadn't been goaded into action, otherwise this really would have been a good opportunity. Her eyes fell onto the depths of annihilating nothingness, where the battlefield was. She was secretly anxious. Qin Yu, oh Qin Yu, you brat, it wasn't easy for you to reach this step. Don't drop the ball at this critical moment. The strength of the blazing suns was your strength. Wasn't this the so-called blazing sun's control, just like that? It was just a matter of window paper. As long as you figured it out, everything would be fine. And at the same time, one blazing sun after another descended into annihilating nothingness. Of course, they restrained their auras. Otherwise, just the light produced by the gathering of 8 blazing suns was enough to burn down the world. After the blazing suns bowed to Returning Ruins, they hesitated for a moment before cupping their hands towards Meaty to show their respect. After all, just like Red Sea, the only one who dared to provoke this blazing sun was herself. He could clearly sense the arrival of these blazing suns. Looking up, he could see 8 seemingly dim, blazing suns in the distance. But in truth, Dubhe was well aware that these 8 blazing suns had only restrained their auras in order to appear in front of him. In fact, each one of them possessed a might that far surpassed his current strength. But that didn't matter. Before long, once he killed Qin Yu and swallowed up the fragments of the blazing suns, he would be able to complete the blazing suns. At that time, he would also leap up and become a true blazing sun, a transcendent existence that illuminated the heavens and myriad worlds. As for the returning ruins and the other aura, Dubhe didn't know what sort of secrets were hidden within, but it seemed to be related to the battle of the blazing suns. But none of this was important. As long as they didn't interfere and allowed him to fight Qin Yu, then Dubhe, would definitely become the final victor. With a thought, the icy cold aura became even stronger. The invisible ice became thicker and thicker, submerging Qin Yu in layer after layer. At the same time, it became increasingly hard. Qin Yu had already fallen into a trance, and as time passed, his situation continued to worsen. In other words, with every breath of time that passed, his chances of victory increased by a fraction. As for Qin Yu, he was still deep in thought. There is only something I don't dare to think about. There is nothing I can't do. His thoughts slowed down until they nearly froze. But once his thoughts were truly frozen, his fate was sealed. Vaguely, it was like he had grasped onto something. But soon, this feeling slipped away from his fingers. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind. Qin Yu suddenly grasped onto that vague inspiration. To build a divine kingdom and gather faith, it was equivalent to constantly accumulating until there was a qualitative change. Only then could one ignite the great Tao of incense burning. His own divine kingdom was his domain. With a single thought, he could control everything. Only by thinking about it could he truly accomplish it. Could it be that after controlling the blazing suns, the myriad heavens and myriad worlds would become his divine kingdom? Chapter 1853. The returning void suddenly frowned. He looked at the battlefield and glanced at little Meaty from the corner of his eyes. "Umph." Meaty sneered. "What are you looking at?" "I'm right here, and I haven't even moved a single toe." This is little Qin Yu's own perception. Her eyes were bright. She knew that little Qin Yu wouldn't be so stupid. After all, he was the one she had chosen. Red Sea said indifferently. "So what if you've understood it? Dubhe's control over the power of the blazing sun is far above his. The result won't change." "Smelly woman, shut up." Meaty rolled her eyes. "Your mouth is so smelly. How long has it been since you brushed your teeth?" Dark red surged in the depths of Red Sea's eyes. The ultimate ruin suddenly said, "Do not offend Gue E. I have said the same thing twice." Red Sea lowered her head. "I was wrong." She cupped her hands together. "Lord Gie, please do not lower yourself to my level." Little Meaty sneered and said nothing. "Continue watching." The ultimate ruin's voice was calm, but the gloominess in his voice could be clearly sensed. He was in a bad mood. In the battle to compete for the blazing suns, the endless ruins had laid down many killing moves. They had calculated that Qin Yu would die without a doubt, but the development of the situation was always unexpected. First, there was the matter of Qin Huang being killed. Qin Yu had used Qin Huang's hand to kill himself, preserving his own strength and not falling into a weakened state. The second reason was that Qin Yu refused the fusion of the two Qin kingdoms. He gave up the Qin Emperor's mark that could help him become even more powerful. Otherwise, when the annihilation nothingness battlefield spread and swallowed the entire Xianyang city, Qin Yu would have been severely injured. Third, Skypavat's strength far surpassed Qin Yu's. Although it seemed like both sides were evenly matched, the truth was that victory and defeat had already been decided. Facing Heaven's pivot, Qin Yu's chances of victory were so slim that they could be ignored. But now, Qin Yu was enlightened. This caused a foreboding premonition to rise in returning Void's heart. Comprehension was not knowledge. It was just like how everyone knew all sorts of principles in the world. However, knowing was one thing, but how many people could truly act according to those principles? Even though he knew very well that it was a choice that was beneficial to him. From this, one could see the difference between enlightenment and enlightenment, because those who were enlightened could truly follow the principles. And at this moment, in Qin Yu's eyes, he was one of the strongest and most powerful principles in the universe. So, since I'm so strong, how could I be sealed by a block of ice? Thinking to this point, his thoughts suddenly became smoother. Kacha, kacha, cracking sounds continuously rang out around him. The invisible power of ice began to shatter at this time. It couldn't withstand the aura that Qin Yu released. It was the power of the blazing sun. In the void, the great sun, which had clearly dimmed, shone brightly again. The bright light swept across all directions. Tian Shu frowned, and a gloomy look appeared in his eyes. Victory was right in front of him, but suddenly something happened. However, his thoughts quickly calmed down. He raised his hand and clenched his fist. Deprive. Since the ice seal had failed, there was no point in continuing. What's more, the might of the blazing sun wasn't limited to this. However, deprivation was one of Jiao Yang's most powerful methods. It could directly deprive any existence that was illuminated by its light of power and take it into its own body. These simple words didn't seem like much, but one couldn't forget that there were 9 blazing suns that illuminated the world. The myriad heavens and myriad worlds were within them. In other words, as long as Jiao Yang wanted to, it could directly plunder the strength of any existence in the myriad heavens and take it into itself. The blazing sun behind Tian Shu that represented him erupted with a terrifying, swallowing strength. It was like an incomparably massive vortex that covered Qin Yu and the blazing sun behind him. At this time, it felt like countless sharp knives were crazily cutting and tearing at Qin Yu's strength. Then it swallowed and absorbed Qin Yu's strength. As for Qin Yu, he soon felt the pain of having his strength plundered. Even so, his expression remained calm. Since the myriad heavens and myriad worlds were his divine kingdom, then all of his will could be carried out. Deprivation. With a loud shout, the blazing sun behind him shook. Facing Tian Shu's swallowing strength, it chose the toughest and most direct way to resist. The little blue lamp's voice sounded out. Qin Yu, in your current state, it isn't a good choice to fight Tian Shu head-on. Qin Yu said, I know, but do you think I have a better choice right now? His eyes were firm. Frontal collision? This was because Qin Yu was well aware that he couldn't resist Tian Shu. In the end, he would be swallowed up. But this would take time. And what Qin Yu needed to do was to kill Tian Shu before the little blue lamp was swallowed up. In his current state, he had already become one with the little blue lamp. Every thought he had was clearly sensed. The little blue lamp finally understood what Qin Yu was thinking. Tian Shu's advantage was that he had a greater comprehension of the power of the blazing sun, a greater control over it, and a greater strength. Then he would strip away this advantage and eliminate the factor of the blazing sun, only relying on his own strength to fight and compete. This was Qin Yu's only chance of victory today. Qin Yu, hurry up. After speaking, the little blue lamp restrained its aura. In the next moment, the blazing sun that represented Qin Yu erupted with an even brighter light. It did everything it could to entangle the other blazing sun fragment, making it so that it couldn't help Tian Shu. After all, in this mutually devouring battle, whoever's strength was borrowed would fall into a weakened state. Tian Shu had seen through Qin Yu's plan, but he didn't fear it. This was because even if he didn't rely on the power of the blazing sun, he was still an existence that stood at the peak of cultivation. As for Qin Yu, he had only recently risen. Although he was strong, he was still incomparably young. And in a battle at the same level, this sort of immaturity was undoubtedly a fatal flaw. Rumble, rumble. Above his head, the 2 blazing sun phantoms shook, crazily swallowing each other. Their strengths collided, causing the annihilation nothingness battlefield to tumble. But it was clear that the little blue lamp was at a disadvantage. Its strength was slowly fading away. Perhaps at the start, This loss wasn't obvious. But as the other blazing sun fragment grew stronger, the speed at which it swallowed the little blue lamp would also increase. In fact, when the disparity in strength between the two blazing suns reached a certain degree, the other would only need a single bite to swallow the little blue lamp. So, just like the little blue lamp said, Chinyu had to deal with Tian Shu as soon as possible. Chinyu, I am right here. If you want to kill me, then make your move. Tian Shu slowly said. He lifted a hand, and light surged between his fingers. It gathered in his palm, gradually turning crimson. Heat, burning, annihilation, brutality, and aura crazily surged out. Purgatory descends. With a roar, Tian Shu lifted his hand and pulled forwards. Thus, in this annihilation, nothingness battlefield, a new world of purgatory appeared. Everything was crimson red. Endless blazing magma tumbled and surged within this purgatory world. The air was flooded with the aura of annihilation. Misty frowned, her eyes turning icy cold. She looked at the expressionless Red Sea. You little girl, your hands are quite long. Her tone was calm, not too aggressive. But it was this calmness that caused the gathered blazing suns to subconsciously frown, a deep sense of dread growing in their hearts. They didn't dare to say that they were familiar with this person's temper. After all, in the last trillion years, no one had interacted with her too much. But there was one thing they were certain of. The calmer her attitude was, the more she didn't reveal anything, the angrier she was in her heart. After all, when she tore apart all pretense of cordiality with endless ruin in the past and fought with him, all the blazing suns had been present. They had seen it with their own eyes, and their expressions at that time were quite similar to what they had today. Red Sea remained silent. She didn't try to argue back. What was done was done. There was no need to hide anything in front of her, nor was there any possibility. In terms of fear, Red Sea had to admit that even though she was a blazing sun, she was still a little afraid. After all, from a certain perspective, this person in front of her was an existence on the same level as endless ruin. But it was only a little. She feared her, but it wasn't that she feared her so much that she didn't dare to do anything. Chinyu could not become the new blazing sun. Within the Star River Divine Palace, the hidden blazing sun ruler said, "We did not violate the agreement by attacking Chinyu, so I ask that you do not break the rules." Misty coldly sneered. Rules? If you said those words to the other her, they might be a little useful. Do you think I would care? Endless Ruin had a calm expression. He flicked his fingers several times, and the void of annihilation stirred up some ripples. Returning to one, this is indeed not a violation of the agreement between us. Misty narrowed her eyes. Are you threatening me? Endless Ruin said, if you want to understand it that way, then so be it. He took a deep breath and then exhaled. Chinyu is right here, right in front of my eyes. If I wanted to kill him, it would be extremely simple. So, do not try to provoke me. This is my advice. Misty lightly said, why don't you try and touch Chinyu? His tone was indifferent. That was the expression he had. The blazing suns, including Red Sea, all had different complexions. Her eyes began to throb with fear. In the past, she had revealed such an expression. Then, a great war had erupted without warning. If it weren't for the fact that they had quickly retreated from the battlefield and were caught up in it, even if they didn't die, they would have shed several layers of skin. Could it be that another great war would erupt today? Your tempers are far too foul. For better or for worse, you are people with a bit of status. Since everyone has made a bet, let's just quietly watch from the sidelines. You want to fall out with each other at the drop of a hat? Your faces are far too ugly. A slightly helpless voice sounded out in everyone's ears. As the void of annihilation surged, the ruler stepped out. She was still languid and her hair was a bit messy. She seemed half asleep and half awake. But at this moment, as the ruler appeared, space suddenly quieted down. Endless Ruin's pupils violently shrank. The divine light in his eyes rose as he stared at the ruler, a look of shock on his face, as if he never imagined that the ruler would suddenly appear in front of him. This surpassed Endless Ruin's expectations. As for Meaty, she seemed even more surprised. Her eyebrows furrowed together as she looked at the ruler, her complexion extremely gloomy. Red Sea and the other blazing suns were shocked speechless. They carefully glanced back and forth between Meaty and the ruler. The ruler lifted a hand and pinched Meaty's face. This little gloomy energy is quite frightening. All right, now that we've met, it's too late to say anything else. So, let's just quietly accept reality. After all, we'll meet sooner or later. We might as well do it earlier. Meaty coldly snorted. She slapped her hand away and turned her head away, not saying anything. The ruler smiled and looked at Jiesu. Hey, old friend, we meet again. How come you bullied my little sister when I wasn't around? Who's your little sister? Meaty muttered. Endless Ruin's expression returned to normal. He smiled. It's all a misunderstanding. I would never do such a thing. You know me. I know you quite well. The ruler nodded. After all, I was the one who personally tore apart her body bit by bit. I ground it into powder and scattered it across the infinite heavens. How could I forget? Endless Ruin nodded. Let's not talk about it. When I think back to that feeling, it's really quite refreshing. Fortunately, I didn't suffer for nothing. At least I got some interest back. The ruler smiled. Why don't we relive it once more and find that feeling of being young and impulsive? She was smiling, her eyes bright and filled with eagerness. Meaty coldly sneered. There were always some people who felt that she was unreasonable and liked to act shamelessly. But just where did this personality of hers come from? When it came to being shameless, she never dared to say that she was a professional. Endless Ruin bitterly smiled. All right, I admit my mistake. I was in the wrong before. I apologize. He cupped his hands together and begged for forgiveness. The various blazing suns felt their hearts relax. Only then did they discover that their backs were already soaked with cold sweat. One Meaty was still fine, but no one expected that the ruler would also suddenly appear. This plot was truly unexpected. After all, once the two of them met, their fates were sealed. It was no wonder that Lord Endless Ruin had lowered his head. This matter had far exceeded his expectations. However, it was best not to fight. Otherwise, the situation today would truly spiral out of control. The ruler faintly smiled. Her eyes swept over the various blazing suns. No one dared to meet her gaze. Since no one has any objections, then let's quietly watch. Before the bet is over, there's no need to be in such a hurry to turn hostile. Endless Ruin bitterly smiled. No matter how he thought about it, these words didn't sound right. Within the purgatory, countless tongues of fire erupted, each one capable of burning down the skies. They turned into thick crimson chains that rushed towards Chinyu. At the same time, magma gathered from all directions, turning into a giant lake of magma. No, in terms of the area covered by magma, perhaps calling a sea of magma would be more appropriate. Chinyu lifted a hand and swept out. The ancient divine spear fell down, and the chains that rushed towards him collapsed, unable to approach at all. But this was only an appetizer. It wasn't worth mentioning at all. Disregarding the fact that these broken chains were restored in the next moment and howled towards him from all directions once more. At this time, the sea of magma within the purgatory was violently tumbling. As the waves surged, it was like some terrifying creature was being bred within, about to break out from the sea. Chapter 1854. The range of the Annihilation Void battlefield continued to expand. With Great Sheen's capital Xianyang as the center, it had already swallowed nearly half of the central wilderness and was continuing to devour the desolate domain at an even faster speed. All of this seemed to be soundless. Yet it was a true calamity of destruction, and a myriad of living beings had perished within it. Above it, two blazing suns burned brilliantly, each releasing their greatest strength to desperately plunder and swallow the other's strength. Moreover, these two blazing suns came from the same great sun fragment. They were originally one entity, so there were no hidden dangers in swallowing the other's strength. To put it simply, whoever was able to devour the other party today would be able to smoothly become the new blazing sun. To the little blue lamp, this was a battle that was doomed to fail from the start. But it still chose to believe in Chinyu without hesitation. Just like it said before, Chinyu had no other choice, and neither did the little blue lamp. They had no choice. If they didn't want to wait for death, they could only give it a try. The little blue lamp bet that Chinyu could smoothly kill Dubhy before it was swallowed by the other blazing sun fragment. As long as Dubhy died, today's battle would end. And at this time, in the Annihilation Void battlefield, in the sea of purgatory magma, a giant beast roared. Its crimson eyes locked onto Chinyu's figure, filled with an endless aura of destruction. Roar! The magma beast roared. It opened its mouth and swallowed. Behind Chinyu, the phantom of the great Tao appeared. He raised his hand, and the ancient divine spear held out. Like a waterfall, it pierced through space and shot towards the magma beast. In the next moment, the spear pierced through flesh and blood, piercing through the giant beast's body and nailing it to the magma sea. However, another gigantic beast soon emerged from the lava. No, it was the beast that had been pierced by the ancient divine spear and nailed to death. But now, it was in perfect condition, without any signs of injury. Chinyu frowned. He raised his hand and grasped forward. With a loud rumble, the entire magma sea boiled and a terrifying strength spread out. The ancient divine spear was suppressed at the bottom of the sea. The magma beast soared into the sky. It flapped its wings and opened its mouth full of sharp teeth, ruthlessly biting down. Hum! The mountain river sword appeared, whistling through the air. The body of the giant lava beast suddenly froze, and in the next instant, its head was separated from its body. Its corpse crashed into the sea of lava, creating huge waves. But something shocking happened again. Not long after the corpse of the giant lava beast fell into the sea, another giant lava beast charged out. It seemed to possess some kind of terrifying, undying attribute, because this magma beast could be reborn continuously. Chinyu lifted a finger, and the mountain river sword howled out. Boundless sword energy was released, wrapping around the lava monster. In an instant, the magma behemoth was cut into countless pieces. With a rumble, it was like giant rocks falling into the sea of magma. Unfortunately, this still did not cause any obvious damage to the magma beast. It once again rushed out of the magma sea. Divine Pivot was expressionless. It's useless. It's the magma sea, and the magma sea is the giant beast. And as long as this purgatory world exists, there will be an endless stream of magma pouring in, causing the magma sea to never be extinguished. Chinyu silently slashed out with his sword, killing the magma beast again and again. Although these slashes seemed simple, each one consumed a considerable portion of his strength. Divine Pivot coldly sneered. Chinyu had fallen into a state of exhaustion. As time passed, he would gradually weaken. Moreover, time was on his side to begin with. If Chinyu wanted to, Divine Pivot didn't mind wasting time with him. This was because every moment that passed meant that Chinyu's fragment of the blazing sun would be robbed of a bit of its strength. Magma Beast Andorra. Divine Pivot praised. Its life force is even stronger than before. His gaze fell on Red Sea. Little girl, it seems your strength has risen a great deal in these past years. His attitude was gentle, and there was no threat in his tone. But facing such a Lord Ruler, Red Sea was clearly even more afraid. She bowed respectfully and said, "Your Excellency Ruler, since I'm already involved in this gamble, I naturally have to think of a way to obtain the greatest benefits. So, I ask that you understand my actions." The Lord Ruler smiled. "Since you say that, I am not an unreasonable person, so of course I will understand. But after sleeping for so many years, I've been feeling very hungry lately, as if I could eat a mountain." She lifted a hand and pointed. "I think Andorra is no different from a mountain. Moreover, it has been marinated in magma for so many years, so its meat must be very chewy. Its taste must be top-notch. So, Red Sea, you will be very obedient and sensible and give Andorra to me, right? Red Sea's complexion stiffened. Divine Pivot said, Red Sea, it is your good fortune that Gue has taken a liking to Andorra. Once today's matters come to an end, you can give it to her. Red Sea bowed. Yes. The Lord Ruler smiled. He ran a hand through his hair. It seems that Divine Pivot's face is greater. My words aren't very useful now. Divine Pivot cupped his hands together. Gue, you are too modest. She sneered. You too. Aren't you tired of acting? She took a step forward. How about we fall out right now? Don't be childish. The Lord Ruler glared at her. What's the rush? The results haven't come out yet. That kid Chin Yu. Although he's a bit stupid and his cultivation talent is average, and he doesn't have any trump cards he can use, his luck is pretty good. I think that while Andorra is hard to kill, it shouldn't be too difficult for him. Divine Pivot nodded. Indeed. Let's watch for a while longer. Humph. Meaty curled her lips. How boring. Her eyes flashed. I have something else to do. You two stay here and watch. Call me when we have a falling out. Swish. Meaty vanished. The next moment, she appeared somewhere in the battlefield of nothingness. Come out, she said coolly. Stop hiding. Bai Feifei's figure appeared. She smiled. We meet again. Meaty frowned. She looked her up and down. I misjudged you. Your concealment method is quite good. Bai Feifei shook her head. It can't be considered concealment because I hadn't awakened before Chin Yu killed Qin Shi Huang. Enough nonsense. What do you want? Bai Feifei said. I don't know either. There was a hint of confusion in her eyes, but she quickly regained her composure. If I really have to answer, it's that I haven't thought about it yet. Meaty narrowed her eyes. Bai Feifei said, Are you sure you want to fight me? Divine Pivot is right here. If he knows that there's another me besides the two of you, do you think Divine Pivot will fall out with me right now? Meaty sneered. Do you think I'm afraid? Of course you're not, but Qin Yu will die. Bai Feifei's tone was calm. She blinked. I haven't thought about it yet, so why don't you wait a little longer? Not only will you not get what you want, you might even force me to make a decision you don't want to see. What's the point? Meaty's eyes grew colder, but Bai Feifei knew that she had chosen to concede. She smiled and said, All right, I'll think about it seriously before making a decision. She turned and left. Swish. Bai Feifei disappeared. Meaty looked at the place where her figure disappeared, her brows furrowed even tighter. A variable had indeed appeared. She knew that if they continued to split and split like this, problems would arise sooner or later. It might not be obvious once or twice, but as the number of times piled up, it would eventually lead to a quantitative change. Hence, Bai Feifei's appearance. Although Meaty was not afraid, there was no doubt that she was still threatened. Once He sensed Bai Feifei's awakening and confirmed her current existence, he would definitely not maintain his current attitude. After all, the more cowardly this fellow appeared, the more enraged he was. Once he erupted, Qin Yu would definitely be the first to die. So annoying. Meaty's face was full of anger. She looked in the direction of the battlefield and saw that Qin Yu was still attacking. Her brows furrowed even more. The giant magma beast Andorra was an almost immortal existence. Unless one could cut through the entire sea of magma with one strike, there was no way to truly cause it any harm. Was this fellow stupid? He should have known long ago after so many strikes. Yet he kept attacking. Boom! Sword aura erupted, and the giant magma beast was dismembered once again. Then, unsurprisingly, it was reborn in the sea of magma. Its crimson eyes locked onto Qin Yu, revealing a hint of mockery. To be able to kill a proud sun fragment holder was enough to become a beast's glory. Roar! Andorra opened its mouth wide, and Qin Yu slashed down with his sword again. The mockery in its eyes deepened. The power of the mountain and river sword was indeed terrifying and could easily cut through its body, but it was meaningless. But soon, the mockery in the giant beast's eyes turned into shock, followed by pain and horror. Boom boom at this moment, countless sword auras erupted from the sea of magma, whistling through every inch of space and covering the entire sea of magma, tearing everything apart. At the same time, tiny cracks appeared on the surface of the giant magma beast's body, covering its scales. Its eyes were filled with despair and disbelief. In the next moment, Qin Yu's sword fell. It was still as clean and efficient as before. This strike directly cut the giant magma beast's body in half, then dismembered and broke into countless small pieces. Rolling, surging, shaking, the scorching sea of magma fell into silence. Boom! The magma shattered, but what flew out wasn't the resurrected giant magma beast, but the ancient divine spear that had been suppressed by the sea of magma. Ancient! Qin Yu roared. The ancient divine spear hummed, and the runes on its surface lit up. It instantly pierced through space and disappeared. In the next moment, he appeared in front of Dubhe. Without any pause, the spear pierced through his chest. Boom! Dubhe's body shattered, but in the next moment, it reformed. He looked at Qin Yu and frowned. To be able to kill the giant magma beast, Qin Yu, you're not bad. But this is still meaningless because I have already transcended the rules. I am eternal and indestructible. Dubhe lifted a hand. Reverse. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Invisible rules descended, instantly completing the construction. In this area, time began to flow backwards. Thus, the silent sea of magma began to tumble once more. The already dead giant magma beast Andorra let out a deep and resentful roar. Qin Yu was expressionless. Constructing the rules and reversing the river of time, I cannot do that. But just because I cannot do it doesn't mean I am helpless. He raised his hand and raised the Mountain River sword. The long sword hummed. In the next moment, the entire purgatory world. No, it should be said that as far as the eye could see, the battlefield of annihilation all surged with a dense sword aura enveloping the purgatory world within it. And this was Qin Yu's true goal when he swung his sword over and over again. Killing the Andorra behemoth was just a facade, a cover to conceal his true identity. The rules that had been established and descended in accordance with the will of Dubhe were instantly destroyed by the eruption of the sword aura. Thus, by obeying these rules, the flow of time that was reversed was forcibly pulled back to the correct state. Roar the Andorra behemoth roared madly. One of its giant claws had already broken through the magma and was about to leap out. However, all of its movement stopped in the next moment. The giant claws that were exposed outside the magma suddenly exploded into pieces and scattered into the sea of magma. Heaven's pivot frowned. A thought to descend into the world and actually destroy the rules that were rebuilt according to my will. I must admit that I underestimated your strength a bit. But do you think that a mere sword breath world can trap me? He flicked his sleeve. Rumble, rumble, rumble. As if raging waves had appeared out of nowhere, a terrifying strength spread out, sweeping out in all directions. The sword aura shattered and dissipated. Beneath heaven's pivot strike, it was simply unable to resist. The mountain and river sword hummed. Its surface released a dazzling, cold light. Countless sword auras appeared out of thin air. They seemed to split apart, one turning into two turning into four, until they filled the entire world, covering every corner, crazily filling in the gaps created by the shattering of the sword aura. Qin Yu took a step forward. He slowly said, "Compared to the sword breath world, I prefer to call it sword prison. It indeed has no way to truly suppress you here, but that wasn't my goal to begin with." After a brief pause, he said, "Because I want to kill you." Bang! Sword prison boiled over. There were far too many violent sword auras. The moment they erupted, everything was covered up. It was impossible to see what was happening within. But to the people watching this battle, this wasn't a problem at all. The Lord Ruler smiled. "I knew it. This Qin Yu brat's luck isn't bad. He was actually able to obtain the help of such a divine sword and easily turn the situation around." Endless ruin. He really couldn't understand why the Lord Ruler had the face to say these words. Could it be that just because he was thick-skinned that he could do whatever he wanted? Endless ruin Your expression seems like you want to say something. You're wrong. Endless ruin, are you in a bad mood? No. Shaking your head means you admit it. The Lord Ruler arched an eyebrow. You are a man, so you need to be a bit more magnanimous and broad-minded. Otherwise, you'll be like you, always holding something in your heart and brooding over it. That's not good. Endless Ruin's lips twitched. Returning One, if you continue to speak like that, it will be very boring. The Lord Ruler smiled. Fine, then I won't speak anymore. She stretched out a hand and snapped her fingers. Little meat, don't run too far away. Perhaps someone will soon break their promise and turn hostile in front of everyone. Endless Ruin shook his head. He helplessly said, I have always been a man of my word. He lifted a hand and pointed at the vast and mighty sword aura that howled through the air. Moreover, I have studied Dubby before. Although his cultivation is ordinary, his methods are quite good. For Chinyu to obtain the help of a divine sword is his good fortune. Dubhy is also a wielder of a fragment of the blazing sun, so it would be strange if he didn't have several cards in his hand. Just as his voice fell, stars began to appear in the battlefield of the annihilating void. They turned into a sea of stars that covered Sword Prison. Every single star was like a towering mountain, and a formless suppressive force descended upon it, causing the sword aura to instantly become incomparably slow and difficult to move. Chapter 1855. Endless Star Sea. The ruler narrowed his eyes. Within the Star Sea Temple, the blazing sun leader bowed. Since you are understanding of Red Sea, I believe you won't make things difficult for me. Ha! The ruler lightly said. Are your breasts bigger than hers? The blazing sun leader's complexion changed. In the next moment, he seemed to suffer a heavy blow and his face paled. Far away from the Void Realm battlefield, one of the blazing suns suddenly dimmed. Your Excellency returning, I have not violated the agreement. The blazing sun leader was both shocked and angry. Just now, a portion of his authority had been stripped away. The ruler said, I find you displeasing to the eye. Do you have a problem with that? Returning remained silent, but his silence was undoubtedly a declaration of his position. The blazing sun leader could only grit his teeth and lower his head. Oh, you are still gnashing your teeth in front of me. Are you trying to scare me? The ruler smiled. It seems I have been quiet for too long, so long that you little brats have forgotten my past methods. The ruler said, Star C, apologized to returning. Yes, the blazing sun leader bowed. Your Excellency returning, I was wrong. I ask you to be magnanimous. Humph, I can't be bothered to argue with you. The ruler waved his hand, his expression light. Once Qin Yu becomes the blazing sun leader, he will naturally settle the grudges between you two. Returning smiled. Returning, that might not be the case. The ruler curled his lips. Let's wait and see. Returning said, I favor Dubhy. Qin Yu will win. Dubhy will win. The two glared at each other, neither willing to back down. This was because, for some people, words weren't just empty words. If the blazing sun leader could speak the law, then what about returning and returning, who were the only two in the world? These words couldn't be spoken casually. The ruler had indicated that Qin Yu would become the final victor. Returning had to support Dubhy and refute him. This wasn't a bickering, but a necessary action. It was a battle of wills. Otherwise, their words would directly affect the battle for the blazing sun leader. Just pretend I didn't say anything. The sovereign sighed. Sinkhole, it's been so many years, but you're still so petty and cautious. It's really boring. Sinkhole nodded. I'm old and my temper can't be changed. Please forgive me. He smiled and nodded, admitting to it. This caused the sovereign lord to look at him with even more admiration. This fellow's patience was really top-notch. At that moment, the ultimate ruin's eyes flashed, and he looked into the distance. It was the edge of the Annihilation Void battlefield, a place that was constantly expanding. Where's Little Meaty? It's not her style to suddenly leave now. The Lord Ruler yawned. Who knows? Youngsters nowadays are all weird. No one can guess what's going on in their heads. That's right. Young people aren't to be trifled with. It's more relaxing if we talk together. Sinkhole agreed. The sovereign frowned. Hey, do you know how to talk? Who are you calling old? I'm suing you. Have you seen my fair skin, beautiful face, and long legs? I'm very charming. The returning void smiled and did not reply. A bright light flashed in the depths of his eyes. There seemed to be something wrong with the state of returning to one. He did not discover anything from sensing her aura, nor did he find anything from observing her on the surface. However, the ending ruin believed in his intuition and also believed that there must be a reason for little Meaty's sudden departure. What could have happened? Could it be? The returning void's expression was calm as his thoughts turned. He suddenly felt that there really was a chance for him to turn hostile today. After all, rather than treating the symptoms and not the root cause, the returning void would not hesitate to completely eliminate the hidden danger. However, this matter could not be rushed. He had to make a clear judgment. At the edge of the annihilation void battlefield, little Meaty frowned and looked back. Her face darkened. That bastard sinkhole still had a sharp nose. Bai Feifei's problem had to be solved. Otherwise, her existence could very well lead to irreversible consequences. But now, little Meaty could not do anything because Bai Feifei was beside Qin Chi. Niu Dingtian was sweating profusely. He knew Bai Feifei, but this woman's aura had not been this terrifying before. The Niu family were all here. If this woman were to turn hostile, Niu Dingtian did not dare to think of the consequences. They might all be wiped out today. But wasn't this woman one of Qin Yu's? Why did he suddenly change his face? Moreover, he was so strong. Qin Chi looked up. Are you here to kill me? Bai Feifei said honestly, I haven't decided yet. Qin Chi said, Can you tell me why? Bai Feifei reached out and rubbed her little head. Stop talking nonsense. Of course it's because you are Qin Yu's sister. Qin Chi frowned. I won't let you use me to threaten my brother. Bai Feifei smiled. You little girl, you're talking nonsense again. You have no choice what I want to do. She looked back at the annihilation void battlefield that was rapidly engulfing them. Bai Feifei knew very well that little Meaty was watching her from there. But now, she cannot do anything. Bai Feifei smiled and looked back at Niu Dingtian. Hey, hurry up and take us away at a time like this. When the annihilation void battlefield spreads, it will be too late to escape. All right. Niu Dingtian gritted his teeth. It was a blessing, not a curse. If it was a curse, they could not avoid it. He had no other choice. With a flick of his sleeve, the space around them trembled, and they disappeared the next moment. On the other side, in the sword prison, Qin Yu frowned. It wasn't just because the sword breath was being suppressed by the stars that had appeared, making it difficult for the sword prison to operate. More than that, he sensed an aura that he detested from those stars that had appeared. No, using the word loathing was too mild. To be more accurate, Qin Yu loathed it. Pain. From the depths of his heart, endless ruthlessness rose up. He wished he could crush these stars one by one. Thump, thump, thump. His heart beat vigorously in his chest, faster and faster. It pushed the blood throughout his body to revolve at an astonishing speed. At the same time, his eyes began to turn blood red. Ancient! Qin Yu roared out. His blood-red eyes gushed out as he stubbornly stared at the star that was suppressing Sword Prison. At this moment, a still image appeared in his mind. In the depths of the starry sea, there was a majestic temple quietly standing. Beneath it were giant bodies that had died and turned into pillars that supported the temple. An ancient aura filled the air, as if this temple had existed in this state for countless years. In other words, the bodies that had died beneath the temple had silently withstood countless years of suppression, humiliation, and pain. They had been killed in life, and after they died, their corpses had been suppressed beneath the temple so that they could never rise again. And these bodies belonged to the ancient race. Rumble, rumble. The ancient divine spear wildly shook. Terrifying strength constantly erupted from it. Qin Yu gasped for breath. Every time he breathed in and out, it was like he stirred up the clouds, causing the roars of wind and thunder to echo out. The desire to destroy tumbled in his chest. The blood-red color in Qin Yu's eyes deepened as he stubbornly stared at those stars. Suddenly, he roared out once more. Ancient! Rumble, rumble, the annihilation realm shook. The phantom of a towering mountain appeared from within. It supported the heavens and the earth. It was endlessly majestic. It stood straight and tall. It could not be suppressed by the heavens and earth. It was arrogant, overbearing, and domineering. All of it was displayed to its heart's content. At this time, the mountain shook as if something sealed within was about to break free. And the source of the shaking that stirred the Annihilation Realm battlefield was this great mountain's shaking. The blazing sun of the starry sea gripped the void. His complexion changed. He stared at Sword Prison, his pupils violently shrinking. Impossible! He roared out loud. He was enraged to the extreme, but he was also alarmed. At this time, returning Void also couldn't help but frown. Puzzlement appeared in his eyes. The ancient race had been exterminated, and now there was only Qin Yu left. How could this be? Red Sea's complexion was dignified. He slowly said, "The ancient race's 3 divine tools." In the past, when the ancient race was at its most flourishing, they had cultivated the ancient divine armor and ancient divine spear. These were the inherited divine tools of the ancient race. These 2 divine tools shared weal and woe with the ancient race. As long as the ancient race wasn't destroyed, they could exist forever in this world. It was also because of this that, even though the ancient race had withered away, Qin Yu was still able to summon these 2 divine tools after awakening his bloodline. But in truth, the ancient race's divine tools didn't just consist of the ancient divine spear and ancient divine armor. There is also a 3rd divine tool that conformed to the rules of 1 begetting 2, 2 begetting 3, 3 begetting all things. In other words, only the 3 divine tools of the ancient race could be considered complete existences that could display the true might of a divine tool set. In the past, the extremely powerful ancient race had suddenly suffered a calamity. The 3rd divine tool that was being bred had vanished without a trace. In normal circumstances, this divine tool that hadn't appeared in the world should have vanished along with the ancient race. But today, it had actually appeared. The Sovereign Lord's eyes brightened, and he smiled. "I told you that Brat Qin Yu's luck has always been good. It seems that his formidable luck has appeared again today." He turned his head and stared at the blazing sun of the starry sea. "Hey, little fellow, do you feel like you've picked up a stone and smashed it on your own foot?" The blazing sun of the starry sea took a deep breath. So what if he summoned the 3rd divine tool of the ancient race? The ancient race has already been exterminated. How much of their strength can they possibly have left? Returning Void's eyebrows furrowed even tighter. Bang! The mountain collapsed. A longbow flew out, howling as it fell into Qin Yu's hand. In the next moment, the ancient divine armor that covered his body automatically peeled off and fell onto the longbow. Like dense scales, the longbow in his hand turned into a great dragon that could soar into the skies at any moment. Qin Yu lifted his hand and grasped forwards. Bang! The ancient divine spear instantly arrived. With the bow in his left hand and the spear in his right, Qin Yu took a step forward. He drew his arm into a full moon, and the ancient divine spear shook. Hum! Hum! Every single shockwave that spread out would annihilate the void and form circular waves. Although these waves didn't seem remarkable, each one contained a terrifying aura that left one in despair. This was because after countless years, the 3 divine tools of the ancient race had gathered together for the first time, emitting an angry roar. Not only did it possess the combined might of the 3 divine tools, but it also contained all the unwillingness, anger, and resentment of the ancient race. Qin Yu let go. The bowstring cried out like a thunderclap. Bang! The ancient divine spear howled outwards, instantly crossing the annihilating void and piercing through a star. No! The blazing sun of the starry sea suddenly changed his complexion, because at this moment, In the endless distant starry sea, there really was a star that had shattered and disintegrated without warning. His eyes stubbornly stared at Chinyu. Or, to be more precise, he stared at the ancient divine bow in his hands. With Chinyu's current cultivation in addition to the might of the three divine tools, shattering a star wasn't difficult at all. But the key point was that this star belonged to the blazing sun of the starry sea. It was where his divine palace was located and within the range of his power. To shatter a star was the same as punching a hole through the absolute domain formed by his own power. Returning Void frowned, silent. The ruler smiled. Little Chinyu's arrow is quite powerful. This is a pleasant surprise. Xinghai, I told you that you were moving stones, but you didn't believe me. Now do you know what it means to have evil retribution and that the time is yet to come? The blazing sun of the starry sea paled, not uttering a single word. Returning Void let out a long breath. The ancient race's three divine tools were actually born. He shook his head. This doesn't make sense. Regarding this, even he hadn't noticed it before. The ruler smiled and nodded. There are accidents everywhere in the world. You and I cannot control everything. Otherwise today's scene wouldn't have occurred. Returning Void nodded. That's true. But this time, Chinyu didn't pause at all after firing his arrow. He lifted his hand and grasped forwards. Bang! The ancient divine spear flew back in his hand. He pulled back the bow, using the ancient divine spear as an arrow to shoot out a second arrow. In that instant, in the annihilating void battlefield, another star shattered and extinguished. Skypivot revealed a look of anger. He frowned. Whether it was the Purgatory World or the Starseed Descent, both were his trump cards. If he used them with his cultivation, even in his current state, Chinyu wouldn't be able to resist them. But the reality was that he was being targeted at every turn. Great supernatural abilities shot out one after another, but all of them were ineffective against Chinyu. This caused a foreboding premonition to rise in Skypivot's heart. It was like this was fate. Even though the incomparably powerful Skypivot had many methods, when facing Chinyu, there was only defeat awaiting him. His heart filled with fear and alarm. Skypivot looked up. The two blazing sun fragments were still clashing head-on, still continuing at this time. The blazing sun that represented him was clearly brighter than before. It was clear that he occupied the absolute upper hand in this struggle. It wouldn't take too much time. When the disparity in strength between the two blazing sun fragments was pulled to a certain degree, this tug of war would end. The victor would be able to swallow the loser into his belly and chew without restraint. Skypivot looked away. He stared at Chinyu in sword prison. He had already lost some of his confidence to kill Chinyu. But as long as the blazing sun fragment completed its swallowing, he would still become the final victor. He would become the new and unsurpassed blazing sun ruler of the myriad heavens. Bang, 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 the ancient divine bow cried out again and again. The ancient divine spear flew out without end. Every time a star shattered, a new hole would be pierced through the absolute domain of the starry sea blazing sun. Soon, it turned into a ragged sieve. The most direct consequence was that the projection of the blazing sun that seemed to be extremely far away, which represented the blazing sun of the sea of stars, became dimmer and dimmer. At the same time, his complexion gradually paled. His eyes filled with shock, anger, and gloominess. A blazing sun, ruling supreme, wasn't just empty words. The starry sea, blazing sun, and red sea seemed to suffer losses in front of Misty and the Lord Ruler. But this was because they were both a part of returning to one. As for returning to one and returning to ruin, they were the only two existences in the myriad heavens. Their level already surpassed the myriad heavens, and they weren't within the range of the 9 blazing suns. As for others, even super powerhouses that had already ignited their Joss flame great Tao, existences like Emperor Qin or the Tao Master, none of them had the ability to cause any damage to the blazing sun. This wasn't a pure disparity in strength. Rather, they simply weren't on the same level. But now, Chinyu had broken this record. He had used his own strength to counterattack and wound the blazing sun. No. If Qin Yu continued to shoot arrows and the ancient divine spear continued to fly out, once the entire starry sea was destroyed, the absolute domain of the starry sea, blazing sun, would only exist in name. Even with his unsurpassed boundary, if he didn't die, he would be severely wounded. There were many reasons as to why it possessed such terrifying might. First, it was because of Qin Yu's cultivation. By igniting the Joss flame, great Tao, and superimposing the strength of the Nine Realms, he had already stepped onto the peak. Second, it was because the three divine artifacts of the ancient race had been gathered together, forming a complete set of divine artifacts. A complete set of divine artifacts could superimpose upon each other, creating an astonishing degree of amplification. Third, it was because the great calamity of the ancient race in the past had been caused by the starry sea, blazing sun himself. The three divine artifacts of the ancient race had their own spiritual wisdom. They had locked onto the land of destruction of the ancient race and caused an additional degree of damage to the starry sea, blazing sun. These 3 points complemented each other. Without any one of them, there was no way to accomplish this. An astonishing scene occurred. With the status below the blazing sun, he had severely wounded the blazing sun. W. The starry sea, blazing sun roared. Bang! In the next moment, he was sent flying away. The one who had attacked wasn't the ruler. It wasn't that she wasn't willing, but that she had been a step too slow and returning ruins had arrived first. Shut up. Returning ruins had a calm expression. No one is allowed to interfere in the battle for the position of the blazing sun. What he wanted was for W to win. As for what sort of price he would have to pay for this, returning ruins didn't care. Moreover, the one paying the price was the starry sea, blazing sun. Was this important? Disregarding the fact that the starry sea, blazing sun wouldn't die, because of this, even if he did die, it would only mean that a new blazing sun would appear. It didn't matter that someone else could replace him. He raised his hand and shot an arrow. With his status below the blazing sun, he had broken the record and severely wounded a blazing sun. At this moment, Qin Yu seemed infinitely glorious. But what meaning did this have? As long as the battle between the fragments of the blazing sun came to an end, Qin Yu would die a miserable death no matter how glorious he was. Returning Ruins was more than happy to see Qin Yu continue to shine and sink into a blood feud with the ancient race, crazily seeking revenge on the starry sea, blazing sun. This would only waste his precious time, and what W needed right now was time. Bang, bang. One after another, the stars shattered. Qin Yu's momentum was like a crazed demon. His eyes turned blood red, as if a boundless sea of blood were roaring within. Kill, kill, kill. Take revenge for the ancient race. Chapter 1856. Every time a star projection was broken, a real star would be blown up in the depths of the sea of stars. And this would continue to cause damage to the star sea prodigy Sunday. His body trembled slightly, but now, the star sea blazing sun could only endure. This was because of the will of the endless ruins, and also because he knew that as long as the entire sea of stars wasn't extinguished, he would exist eternally. And what Qin Yu was doing now was making him suffer more pain and suffer some heavy wounds. But he wouldn't die. And as long as he didn't die, once this matter was over, the endless ruins would give him sufficient compensation. After realizing this, the star sea blazing sun calmed down. His eyes were icy cold as he stared at Qin Yu, who was constantly shooting out arrows from the ancient divine bow. It seemed incomparably powerful and possessed the strength to destroy stars. But this was destined to be Qin Yu's final bout of madness. Once the fragment of the blazing sun was swallowed up, he would fall into a state of eternal damnation. He was waiting for this moment to arrive. Qin Yu, wake up. You can't kill W like this. Don't be blinded by the hatred in your bloodline. The little blue lamp's voice resounded in his mind, but it was obvious that it didn't work. The blood-red color in Qin Yu's eyes became increasingly thick. Bang, bang, bang. The ancient divine spear shot through star after star. And now, the annihilation nothingness battlefield had covered the entire central desolate and was spreading to the surrounding desolate regions. Niu Dingtian led the Ox family and was one of the many fleeing soldiers. Although he wished he could run as far away as he could, the annihilation aura behind him left him panic-stricken. But right now, he wasn't the one with the final say in the group. Bai Feifei looked into the distance with interest. Perhaps in the eyes of others, all they could see was a pitch-black nothingness filled with the aura of annihilation. But to Bai Feifei, she could clearly see the center of the battlefield. Shooting suns is indeed an addictive thing. Once you start, it's hard to stop. But a person's strength is limited, but the sea of stars is endless. And most importantly, little Qin Yu, what you lack the most is time. If you continue shooting like this, I'm afraid the end you'll face won't be too good. Qin Chi looked nervous. What happened to my brother? Bai Feifei patted her head. Don't worry, your brother is very impressive now. He's shooting arrows at the stars, and every shot is accurate. Perhaps you won't have to die, because even if I don't do anything, Qin Yu will play himself to death. Qin Chi gritted her teeth. Nonsense. My brother is the most powerful. Even Emperor Qin was killed by him. He definitely won't die. What do you know, little girl? Was Qin Huang killed by your brother? Moreover, even if he did it, is it a glorious thing for him to kill himself? Bai Feifei knocked her on the head. Don't be so nervous, it's useless. With your cultivation, you won't be able to help at all. Qin Chi fell silent. She did not want to believe Bai Feifei's words. However, her instincts told her that Bai Feifei was not lying. Her brother seemed to be in danger, and she could only watch from afar. As he thought about it, his eyes reddened. Niu Dao watched from afar and panicked when she saw Qin Chi crying. Hey, what did you do to Chi? Niu Dingtian was so frightened he almost fainted. He hurriedly said, Shut up, little ancestor. Ahem, children don't know any better. Please be magnanimous and don't lower yourself to her level. Bai Feifei smiled. This little girl is a little interesting. Since you're so interesting, I'll let you live a little longer. I'll kill you when I'm tired of it. She stretched and turned back. Misty, in this situation, it doesn't seem to matter whether I make a choice or not. Are you sure you want to continue following me? Swish, Misty's figure appeared. Niu Dingtian's face lit up. He hurriedly cupped his hands. You're here. Misty's face was expressionless. Bai Feifei, you haven't decided yet. You must be hesitating. No matter what happens in the end, I hope you can think clearly before you make a decision. Don't let yourself regret it. Bai Feifei smiled. You think too much. Whether my decision is right or wrong, I won't regret it. She lifted her hand and snapped her fingers. Hurry up and leave. The endless ruin is already suspicious. If we speak a few more words, I fear he will discover us. I don't care, but you'll be in big trouble. Misty looked at Niu Dingtian. Whatever she wants, just cooperate. Don't do anything else. She turned and left. Swish, she vanished from sight. Niu Dingtian's face stiffened. He awkwardly said, Misty's reminder seems to think too highly of me. I didn't even think of anything. Bai Feifei's lips curled up. Is that so? Her eyes seemed to be smiling and not smiling. Niu Dingtian's back was soaked in a cold sweat. Fine. But Bai Feifei had no intention of acting out. She turned and continued to look at the battlefield of annihilation, a trace of helplessness in her eyes. In truth, she didn't know what she was hesitating about. Hadn't she appeared in order to resist the will of returning one? If that was the case, she would just kill Qin Yu. In fact, Bai Feifei didn't even need to do anything. As long as she appeared in front of the endless ruin, he would take care of everything. But now Bai Feifei sighed. Women, sometimes, even they didn't know what they were thinking. She lifted a hand and knocked on her forehead. Then she would wait and see. She would make a decision after thinking it through. Tian Shu frowned. Because he discovered that as Qin Yu continued to shoot arrow after arrow, his aura didn't weaken. Instead, it grew stronger, and his eyes were crimson. They seemed cruel and terrifying, filled with a madness that could destroy all things. But amidst this madness, there was a strange coldness to it. Madness and coldness. These two emotions wove together, causing Tianshu's heart to feel more and more uneasy. Because from the start of the battle until now, no matter how he looked at it, Qin didn't seem like someone who could be so easily killed. And now, he was caught up in the blood feud of the ancient race. His actions of madly attacking the projection of the proud star's sun were really too stupid. Could there be some hidden story behind this? Soon, Tianshu discovered that his guess was correct. Qin suddenly stopped drawing the ancient divine bow and attacking the projection of the stars. Then, the tumbling crimson color in his eyes suddenly settled down. That's right, using the word settled to describe it was appropriate. All of the crimson color sank deep into his eyes, turning into a deep crimson ring. It was like a blood-red decoration had been inlaid into his pupils. When the ring condensed, Qin Yu's aura was restrained. He was like a stone or a log. He looked up, his eyes locking onto Tianshu. As he was covered by the crimson ring, Tianshu's heart shrank, and a great sense of fear rose in him. He was like a peerless, vicious beast that had broken free of its cage and regained its freedom. Kill! Qin allowed a deep breath and drew back the ancient divine bow. This time was different from before. Because of the support of the ancient divine armor, the ancient divine bow seemed to be covered in dragon scales. As the bowstring vibrated, blood energy gushed out. Hum! The blood energy trembled and tumbled. All of the runes on the surface of the ancient divine spear were panting. They sucked in blood energy and turned a deep blood-red color, releasing an incomparably terrifying aura that annihilated the battlefield in the void. Muffled popping sounds rang out, as if the already annihilated void was being torn apart by a terrifying strength. Wherever the spear point pointed, Tianshu's complexion changed. At this moment, he felt an intense threat. It was like a great beast had opened its mouth and its red tongue swept across his face, leaving behind a burning pain. His heart violently beat. A cold and gloomy aura continuously eroded him, making it difficult for Tianshu to even breathe. Ah! Tianshu roared out loud. He lifted a hand and grasped forwards. With a loud rumble, a sea of stars flowed in the skies, weaving together in front of him and turning into a radiant river of stars. I said, the river of stars is endless, life and death without end. In this world, no one can enter. In the next moment, the ancient divine spear shot out. It vanished in a flash and crashed into the river of stars in front of Tianshu. Bang! In an instant, thousands of stars exploded on the spot, causing small areas of the dazzling starry river to darken. Puff, the proud son of the starry skies, spat out a mouthful of blood. His body shivered and his eyes widened. He roared out loud, "Impossible!" At this time, his expression was even more incredulous than when Qin Yu first shot a star. This was because the strength of this arrow had nearly achieved a qualitative leap, reaching the boundary of the proud sun. The returning ruin had no expression. Demonization. Within his sleeves, he clenched his fists. The sovereign glanced at him. Yes, demonization. She shook her head. Who would have thought that this brat Qin Yu would be so bold and play such a dangerous game? Now, everything was clear. Qin Yu had allowed himself to sink into the ancient race's blood feud. Then, by shooting arrows again and again to shatter stars, he had enhanced his demonic nature. Thus, the scene just now occurred. Afterwards, he had subdued his demonic nature and restored his consciousness in a state of demonization, causing his strength to rise to an astonishing degree. But while this matter was simple to say, to accomplish it was difficult, and there were tremendous risks involved. As the saying goes, if you want to gain something, you must lose something. If Qin Yu wanted to obtain enough strength to increase his strength, he had to subdue an even more formidable demonic nature. But this demonic nature came from the heart and was the same as another part of his consciousness. This involved a confrontation of will and mind. If he wasn't careful, there was a chance he would suffer a backlash from the demonic nature and become a puppet controlled by it. Now, the greater the increase in strength that Yu obtained, the more terrifying the risks he had to experience. Thus, even with the sovereign status, she couldn't help but sigh at Yu's courage. And now he had succeeded. Such a formidable demonic nature was equal to another Yu. And with two Yes superimposed on each other, it was enough to make up for the disparity between him and Dubhe. In fact, he could even reverse the situation. This was the reason for the current scene. The sovereign shook her head. She looked at the bottomless. Now, shouldn't it be my turn to speak? Let's make a bet first, so let's quietly watch. No one is allowed to interfere. Schwa, the meaty figure appeared, her expression faint. Or, if you want to fall out with me now, I will give you a chance. The bottomless was silent for a moment. Then, she said, then let's continue watching. The meaty figure's eyebrows rose up before she composed herself. The sovereign smiled. Bottomless, it seems you have some confidence in yourself. Can you speak a bit? The bottomless said, I cannot. Stingy. The sovereign curled her lips and yawned. I'm tired. Little Yu, you can do it. Hurry up and finish your work. In the next moment, a heaven-shaking explosion erupted from the core of the annihilating void battlefield. Rumble, rumble, visible to the naked eye, the annihilating void shook and swept out in all directions. Their speed was astonishing, and they contained a terrifying strength. The ancient divine spear thrust into the galaxy. Stars shattered, and the galaxy rapidly dimmed. But soon, the shattered stars in the galaxy reappeared. They were like mountains that pressed down on the ancient divine spear. But this time, the dazzling stars in the galaxy were unable to suppress the ancient divine spear that was absorbing blood energy. Bang, bang, bang. The stars that reappeared only lasted for a breath of time before breaking apart once more. The ancient divine spear broke forwards. Dubhe's complexion paled. This was because he discovered that the will that descended upon him was actually breaking apart. Because of this, the entire galaxy fell into a state of chaos, as if it would completely shatter in the next moment. And once the galaxy shattered, the ancient divine spear would pierce through Dubhe's chest. He had nowhere to run. Above his head, the two blazing sun fragments could clearly sense the situation between their masters. The great sun phantom that represented Dubhe began to shake, trying to draw out strength. The little blue lamp took this chance to counterattack. It instantly swallowed up a portion of the strength that had been plundered. Stop, Dubhe roared. I can still persist. If you help me now, you will only make the situation worse. The great sun phantom calmed down. Swallow up the other fragment, and we will naturally win. Dubhe took a deep breath and looked straight at Yu. Even if I fall into depravity, you cannot kill me. Vast and boundless galaxy, stabilize for me. Rumble, rumble. The galaxy shook. Yu was expressionless. He stepped forwards, directly breaking into the edge of the galaxy. He grasped the ancient divine spear in his hand. In his other hand, the ancient divine bow began to change. The ancient divine armor that covered it automatically fell off and covered Yu's body. At the same time, the ancient divine bow rapidly bent, forming an ancient divine crown that fell on Yu's head. Bang! When Yu grasped the ancient divine spear, the aura it erupted with rose once more. His arm exerted strength. The ancient divine spear trembled as if it had sunk into mud, slowly pushing forward. His palm touched the divine spear. Because it couldn't withstand the strength of the ancient divine spear, tiny cracks began to appear. Blood gushed out, spreading along the runes of the ancient divine spear. This added a touch of blood to the ancient divine spear, making it even more intense. Spear piercing through the galaxy. Blood began to seep out from Dubhe's orifices. This was the backlash of his while being forcefully destroyed. But his eyes were still calm, without the slightest hint of fear or despair. That was because this was a battle of death where there was only one of them. The victor would reap the harvest and seize the other blazing sun fragment, becoming the new ruler of the blazing sun. If he failed, he would be beyond redemption. Dubby had no path of retreat, so he could only fight with everything he had. Either Cheen, you would pierce through the galaxy with his spear and kill him, or the blazing sun fragment would completely swallow it, making the blazing sun complete and instantly reverse the situation. At this moment, the world was silent. Everyone, including returning Void and returning One, was quietly waiting. This was because they knew that this battle that symbolized the birth of a new blazing sun would soon come to an end. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.